They told me that I was abandoned at the hospital, and I could not believe it. This is crazy.
Tonight on an all-new 2020, a condition so rare and mysterious, it's almost unheard of. A bizarre medical disorder, denying that you're pregnant and then abandoning your babies.
How could your wife give birth and you have no idea? To miss her pregnancy 5 times?
But what caused a different mother to abandon her newborn?
There's a baby found inside of the Salvation Army drop box, the box that you were found in.
Now we're on the hunt with both grown children.
Both sought out to find their birth mothers.
Right.
Right here tonight, a DNA detective.
You're back to where it all started.
Taking them on the search of a lifetime.
That's really all we have to go by, is your DNA and the location that you were found.
All the brand new leads and blind alleys.
I don't want to give you any false hope. This is a long shot.
The setbacks and rejections.
She hung up on me.
And all this time I thought maybe somebody was thinking about me and where I was.
The surprise of something they never saw coming.
And I saw this. I had the same reaction.
And the biggest shock of all, who's waiting behind that door?
It really is opening Pandora's box.
And a big secret.
A big secret.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Amy Robach, and this is 2020. Reporting here tonight, Deborah Roberts.
Who am I? Where am I from?
I was abandoned at a hospital.
I was left out in a donation bin.
I just wanted to know why.
There's this feeling of not being wanted.
I just thought that I would never really know.
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, a small scenic town just outside Spokane, on a lake nestled in the mountains. Its name originating from a Native American tribe who called themselves the Discovered People. But while some are discovered here, others are lost. Our first mystery begins in 1987 at this hospital. A pregnant woman checks herself in, alone, in labor, and oddly carrying no luggage or personal items.
She said she was from California and that she was visiting some friends in Idaho. She was 5'5", brown hair, brown eyes. They said she was quite attractive but uptight.
She signs in as Amy D. Beach, saying she's single and unemployed. At 6:30 a.m., she's moved to the birthing room.
She gave birth to a healthy baby girl, good size, full term.
After a short time with her new baby, the mom does something inexplicable.
She disappeared 12 hours later. She just left the hospital gown on the bed and that was it.
She just walked out.
Just gone.
Mystified, the nurses give the now abandoned baby girl a nickname.
They named the baby Baby Girl Beach, which is pretty cute, actually. One of the better names for a foundling that I've heard.
Foundling.
Foundling, sort of the catch-all term for a child that's abandoned.
This foundling is later adopted by a couple from Idaho.
This was a dream that we had had for so long. When they brought her out, here came this beautiful, beautiful little girl, this little baby.
The Kluges are a loving family, naming their new little girl Andrea, an only child, enjoying piano, swimming, gymnastics. Flash forward 31 years, Baby Girl Beach is now Andrea 𝐂𝐒, who lives in Colorado and works as an office manager in a medical office. She has no idea of the strange circumstances around her birth until age 16, when her adoptive parents finally tell her.
They told me that I was abandoned at the hospital, and I could not believe it. This is crazy.
A crazy mystery she feels compelled to solve.
You have a tattoo.
I do.
What does it say?
It says Baby Girl Beach.
Baby Girl Beach. That was sort of your identity in the beginning.
Right.
You're living a pretty happy life. You've got lovely parents. Why do you need to go looking if you're pretty happy with where you are?
There's always going to be a void that you don't know about. I just have always wanted to meet whoever she was.
That she, the mother who walked out on her hours after her birth, was now the center of Andrea's quest.
Said, my name is Andrea. I was born on April 30th, 1987.
She turns to social media to find her, posting a photo of herself on Facebook holding a sign outlining her story.
I was abandoned at a hospital in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho by a woman named Amy Beach. Please like and share.
The post goes viral.
Her birth made headlines in Idaho after her mother disappeared from the hospital. The woman is using social media to try and be reconnected with her birth mother.
Many adopted kids say they have this sense of yearning. How different is it for those who are foundlings?
It's even more intense because foundlings have zero information about their background. It's like their life began the moment they were found.
2,400 miles away in Anchorage, Alaska, another foundling mystery 1 year before Andrea's. Another runaway mother abandons her baby. It's a cool summer evening in 1986. At sundown, a newborn boy is found, not in a hospital, but in a cardboard box next to a Salvation Army bin.
It was September 4th, 1986. Two teenage boys were out riding their bikes and they heard crying from a box and went over to investigate and were astonished to find a live baby in the box. And they scooped the baby up and I guess literally cycled home to their house with it in their arms.
Hours before, bystanders recall seeing a pregnant woman nearby.
They'd seen a very pregnant young lady standing by the Salvation Army bin, hadn't given it much thought, but then when they got home, they started watching the news and heard that a baby had been abandoned there.
A police sketch is published in the local newspaper, looking for that mystery woman who left the baby. And like Andrea, this baby boy Doe is also adopted into a loving home. He grows up in Idaho, playing in the hills, doing country stuff, being raised with sisters. Flash forward 31 years later. That baby is now Benjamin Tveit, a soldier in the Idaho Army National Guard, and has deployed twice to Iraq.
How did you learn that you were adopted?
It was my 11th birthday. My dad told me I was adopted.
How did it hit you?
I didn't believe him at first, and then I was devastated. They brought the newspaper clippings out that they had preserved. I was spinning. I mean, I was like, "What? This is all a joke, right?" This was the biggest question in my life. Who am I? Where am I from? I would look up at the stars some night and wonder if my mom or dad or if my brothers or sisters or my grandparents were looking at the stars that night.
Ben is now on the biggest and most personal mission to date, trying to solve the mystery of his birth. Like Andrea, he's put his faith in one woman, 𝐷𝐶 Moore, a world-renowned DNA detective whose DNA crime-solving work recently grabbed nationwide attention, leading to arrests in a number of languishing cold cases.
This morning, a break in a 25-year-old cold case. Same technique authorities used to arrest the suspected Golden State Killer.
This is a major game changer for these cold cases. I've worked with dozens, maybe hundreds of foundlings by now, and so I know that this is a really intense process for them.
Still ahead, Andrea's about to find out some secrets get buried for a reason.
You may have this idea that you're going to find birth parents who are just going to readily accept you, but that may not be the case.
And a stunning discovery for Ben.
And I saw this.
Stay with us. Andrea Klug-Napier and genealogist 𝐷𝐶 Moore are on a trip back in time, back to 1987. A year of coincidences when this U2 song about searching topped the charts. And an abandoned baby is the storyline in a #1 movie, 3 Men and a Baby.
I'm not picking it up. You found it.
Where roommates discover an infant left on their doorstep. It was also the year that Andrea was abandoned in real life at this hospital in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Now she and 𝐷𝐶 are retracing the steps of the mom who left her, hoping to find clues that might unlock the mystery.
you're back to where it all started. So a lot's changed since 1987.
Good, how are you? This is one of our postpartum rooms, which actually is similar to what it was back in 1987.
I wonder how much time she spent with you.
At least she was good enough to come in and have you in a hospital.
The feelings that she could have had, I can't even imagine.
Not that she's a hero, but it took a lot of courage to come in.
It was a criminal offense to leave a baby somewhere. Now, fortunately, safe haven laws have been created where women can take a baby to a safe place, like a fire department, hospital, and they won't be prosecuted.
A barren hospital room offering no answers for Andrea. Then suddenly, an unexpected emissary from her past.
Thank you.
This nurse, the same nurse who 31 years ago cared for Andrea as an abandoned infant. Kim Beckman remembers trying to fill the void left by the baby's vanished mom.
I remember holding you a lot. Really? I worked evenings and rocking you and just wanting you to feel loved. And that's all I remember, is that how cute you were, and I'm wondering how desperate that mom must have been. I hope you find your birth mom.
Sadly, clues hard to come by in the maternity ward, with the exception of one. Andrea's mother left behind an admission form, and on it, next to Andrea's baby footprints, her mother's fingerprint.
Was that significant for you?
Well, it was certainly a clue, and it was the only clue we had. And so we did want to follow up on that.
Hopes pinned on this single fingerprint. Andrea and Cece enlist the nearby police department for help.
I'm Scott Hogue. I'm the chief here in Post Falls.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, too. So, let's see what you got here as far as the fingerprints go. The name that was used was last name of Beach. Okay. Are you comfortable that she simply just walked away on her own, that there was no foul play or any of that type of activity that may have occurred?
I don't know if there wasn't any foul play. I
don't know.
Don't know.
I don't want to give you any false hope because this is a long shot, and I'll get in touch with you as soon as I hear something back.
I feel like this is a puzzle that we're trying to put together, but all the pieces are face down on the table.
Like Andrea, Ben Tveit, also abandoned at birth, is determined to find his biological mom.
So right now we're heading to C.C. Moore's house.
Hello.
Hi.
Come on in.
I'm Ben.
Hi. It's really nice to meet
Likewise.
you. All right, come on in.
Okay.
And I have some news, some things to show you. That's not him.
Cece's taken Ben's DNA and entered it into 4 national databases, hoping for a match to his biological mother. With possible hits on distant relatives, the DNA detectives got her work cut out for her.
It's going to be difficult, but it's
Then she catches a break, a direct hit on someone they weren't even looking for.
I logged into your match list a couple days ago, and I saw this. RB is your father.
Ben does an actual double take.
I had the same reaction.
How did the planets align perfectly for that to happen?
It's a man named Richard Blanchfield, who's a pretty incredible guy. He's a Vietnam vet, and he's not just any Vietnam vet, he's a highly decorated Vietnam vet.
What are the odds? Ben, a veteran of 2 tours in Iraq, learning his biological father is a war hero.
His arm was nearly blown off at the shoulder. He was 47 years old at the time of your birth.
Is he still alive?
He is still alive. Here's the good news. Your dad lives 20 minutes from here. He just happens to live down the freeway.
Did you believe this?
I thought I got struck by lightning when she told me. To find a relative that close, it blew my mind.
Up next, Ben's visit face-to-face with a father he never knew.
Trying to regulate my breathing, trying to be calm.
Okay, let's do it.
I knock on the door and there's this voice.
You're knocking at my door.
And Cece hits pay dirt with Andrea.
When I opened it, I had quite a surprise.
I thought, wow, this actually worked. I just couldn't even get on a plane fast enough to go meet her.
Stay with us. As a sergeant in the Idaho National Guard, Ben Tveit has tested his mettle and grit as part of the perilous U.S.-led invasion in Iraq. He's an experienced gunner on one of the most powerful tanks on the planet.
But we're driving to my dad's house.
But now Ben has to muster all the courage he has for a deeply personal mission.
I'm terrified and excited all at the same time.
In 800 feet, turn right onto Knollwood Court.
Longest 800 feet of my life.
Genealogist 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 Moore joins him at a house in Southern California, where Ben's birth father lives.
You ready?
I'm ready.
I know your father's very excited to meet you.
I'm trying to regulate my breathing, trying to be calm and not look like an idiot.
Let's do it.
I knock on the door and there's this voice.
Somebody knocking at my door.
Hello.
Hello, you must be Ben.
I'm Ben.
I'm Doc. Wow. How you doing?
It's eerie.
Very serious. Come on in, son. Come on in. Welcome. Welcome.
And I was just overwhelmed. I didn't even know what to say.
Did you feel a connection?
Yeah, right away. Right away.
Come on in here. This is the room I love the most.
His biological dad, Richard, or Doc Blanchfield, recipient of the Purple Heart, shares keepsakes from a rich life lived.
See the pictures on the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam vet, 82nd Airborne.
The two startled by the similarities in their lives.
You went in the Army, you were 18?
I was 18 years
So
old.
the same as I did. I went in the Marine Corps at 18.
What, if anything, does he remember about Ben's birth mom? Doc recalls a night 32 years ago in Anchorage, Alaska. As a single dad, he had a chance encounter at a bar called the Cabin Tavern.
And there was a lady, young lady, sitting at the bar, and I just went up. Hello, I sat down. Didn't say anything. I had my beer. And we just started a conversation. She was in a difficult relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But I took a liking to her, I really did. She didn't want to go back wherever she came from. I don't remember the lady's name. Honest to God, I don't.
He recalls making dinner for the woman and the two sharing a tender, romantic night.
Before she left, I remember this distinctly. I had 3 statues. I still have 2 of them. They're from China. It was a Chinese goddess statue.
Uh-huh.
And I gave it to her and I said, this will bring you good luck. I never heard from her again. I wonder if she still has it. And here's Sean, my other boy.
These are my brothers?
Yep.
Then a revelation of relief. Doc says he would have kept his son if he'd known he existed.
There was that feeling of rejection that I had for so many years, being abandoned. And it counterbalanced that feeling because I was accepted and I was wanted. It lifted a weight off my shoulders, off my chest. I couldn't go to bed angry anymore.
As a parting gift, Doc offers his newly found son a note. It says, "We are family." And the Marine coda, Semper Fi, always loyal. Meanwhile, Andrea's identity search has hit a snag. She had been so hopeful after offering to police that fingerprint from her birth mom.
And did they find anything?
No. I mean, it would have been great to get the identity, but had her fingerprints been in the system, that probably wouldn't have been a very positive indicator.
Usually it's
If they'd
associated
been
with
arrested,
crime.
we didn't want to believe that she went on to live a life of crime either.
Place 3 swabs.
But where old-fashioned forensics have failed, some high-tech DNA sleuthing by genealogist 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 Moore has come up with a startling match.
This is your match list, and when I opened it, I had quite a surprise. If you share both parents, you would have big blocks of green. So how much green do you see?
There's a lot of green.
Do you know what that means?
So we could be siblings?
You're not just siblings, you are full siblings.
Whoa, that is so crazy.
You share the same mom and the same dad.
And suddenly you realize you've got a sister? For somebody who's not even really expecting much, and you're seeing this now.
I thought, wow, this actually worked. I found something. I just couldn't even get on a plane fast enough to go meet her.
Wasting no time, Andrea leaves Colorado for Wisconsin.
I'm nervous to meet a stranger. It just happens to be my sister. I was so nervous for her to open the door. I just didn't know what to expect. Hi. How are you?
Good, how are you?
At first, Andrea and sister Heather are reeling from a combination of awkwardness and a deep bond.
I just knew immediately that we were both really shy and kind of awkward, and she just immediately told me that she had a bunch of information about our biological family.
That's my adoptive mom.
Heather was adopted in Washington, a state that allows access to adoption records, so she already knows the names of their birth mom and dad.
Our birth mom's name is Deirdre. She went by Cindy. Deirdre. This is our mom.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
After years of searching, the moment has finally come. Andrea's about to learn about her origins, but the truth will be difficult.
She had a baby boy 2 years after you.
Oh my God.
And the baby and her passed away.
Oh my God. Oh, that's so sad. I'm really glad to find all of this out. When I heard that news, it took over. I just couldn't even, I just came to a stop. I will never be able to meet her.
And to hear this from your sister who you just met.
Yeah, it was sad. And all this time I thought maybe somebody was thinking about me and where I was, but she hadn't. It feels like I just lost somebody that I didn't even know.
And there's an astonishing twist in her family saga. While Andrea and Heather were given up, their mother and father kept and raised 2 sons.
The boys were raised by our mother and father.
Why were they raised by your biological parents and you weren't?
Yeah, so we had a lot of questions. This dimple. Yeah, totally.
Next, Andrea starting her journey alone, now paired with her sister. Together, they'll travel to meet their 2 brothers.
Oh boy.
And their father. And confront a deep family secret. A mysterious notation on their mom's death certificate.
It was no normal death certificate, not what you would expect.
Stay with us. Andrea 𝐔𝐋𝐋 has discovered a sister. And together they're going to meet 2 brothers they never even knew they had.
Super nervous. Kind of have a stomach ache.
And someone else, their biological dad.
Oh boy.
With their mother gone, they hope their father holds the key to their looming questions. Why would a mom and dad forsake their 2 daughters, but not their sons?
Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Hi.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Andrea. Nice to meet you.
Finally, face to face with brother Aaron, who answers the door, and then their father Dwight.
Nice to meet you.
The new family finding their footing as Dennis, another brother, joins them.
Got some flowers.
Oh, thank you.
So you were meeting your biological father and your 2 brothers that you never had any idea existed.
I can't even describe the feeling. It was crazy. The article that I have in the newspaper, the nurses described her as uptight and attractive.
Really?
Dwight just immediately started talking to us and telling us everything that he knew about our mother. We just wanted to see every picture that was ever taken of her.
And this picture of her reminded me so much of Heather. You guys look like Mom big time. Yeah. Cindy's.
Deirdre, who went by the name of Cindy, was only 16, and Dwight 17 when they married. She later worked as a computer programmer.
And then he told you about the day she died.
Yeah.
It was like 20 below here, and the weather was bad. The city was shut down. And she told me she had the flu.
He told us that she had been ill and that he left for work and that when he got home, she was unconscious.
I called 911.
And what happened?
Well, they come and took her to the hospital and went to the hospital, and they pronounced her dead. And then all the doctor said was that she was really torn up inside. And then it wasn't until I went home, and it was a couple of days later, I went to a bedroom, door was locked, and I went in there, and there was a baby sitting on the bed. Full-term baby.
An unimaginable discovery, the death of a baby boy he hadn't even known he'd fathered.
I thought I knew her, and I thought everything was great.
But what about Andrea and Heather? Incredibly, Dwight says he had no idea his wife gave birth to them either.
And that's the story.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool. She left us with you.
I thought at first, I'm for sure gonna see something in Dwight that maybe he did know and he's hiding it from us. But immediately when we sat down and he started talking, I knew that there was absolutely no way that he knew about us. She hid everything from him.
Most people will look at this and say, how could this be? How could your wife give birth and you have no idea?
I still question it myself today, wondering how did I miss it?
He says when Cindy was pregnant with their sons Aaron and Dennis, she barely showed.
Her stomach wasn't big at all. Seemed like she gained a little weight through the face.
You are living together in the same house, you're sleeping together in the same bed. You must have seen her disrobe.
I thought maybe it was weight gain or something.
You never recalled her looking pregnant?
No, not ever.
How is it possible that his wife could give birth and he knew nothing about it?
I've worked with foundlings. People always question, how could no one know? How could you hide a 9-month pregnant belly? But women do it all the time.
The sisters, still reeling from it all, visit their mom's grave to say goodbye. Still confounded by why she hid those pregnancies, the answer may lie in a strange notation on Cindy's death certificate. Unattended birth associated with psychotic denial.
Had you heard of that before?
I have seen it in other cases. That's not terribly unusual in foundling cases where somebody denies they're pregnant until it's too late and they haven't made any sort of arrangements. It's probably one of the reasons that some people get abandoned rather than legally adopted.
Denial of pregnancy is a recognized psychiatric or psychological condition.
Psychiatrist Susan Hatters-Friedman has studied the disorder and says it's surprisingly common. 1 in 400 women may suffer from some form.
The woman may have some idea that she's pregnant intellectually, but she pushes it from her mind until she can no longer do so because she's suddenly giving birth. And certainly a young woman's own experiences of abandonment could contribute to denial of pregnancy.
Possibly explaining Cindy's odd behavior is a painful backstory, according to Heather. As a small child, Cindy and her sister were both given up for adoption. They were on a bus en route to an orphanage.
And at the last minute, their brother pulled her sister off the bus and left her.
Left Cindy by
Alone.
herself.
She's just a little girl, almost 3 years old, on this bus alone, who's sent off to some orphanage.
Must have been traumatic for this child.
It's abandonment again. But we only can speculate what sort of emotional damage that may have done to Cindy very early on in her life.
Still ahead, Andrea and Heather about to find out their mother took even more secrets to her grave. And Ben's search for his mother has been narrowed down to 2 women, one of them on the other end of this call, the moment of truth.
In my experience, the DNA doesn't lie.
Anchorage, Alaska, known as the last frontier. And for Ben Tveit, it is the final step in finding the missing link to his past. Desperate to connect the dots, Ben makes a stop at the Anchorage police station.
Hello, Jim. I'm Dave Cook.
Dave, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Believe it or not, he locates the detective who was one of the first on the scene 3 decades earlier.
You didn't have any physical trauma, anything like that. The umbilical cord was tied off with a sandwich tie.
Their most promising lead, that police sketch of a possible suspect, never got an ID.
There were several possible prints, but they were poor and not very useful.
If any fingerprints were lifted, would they have been preserved?
We're talking 30 years now.
Right.
Basically, all the photos have been destroyed. The prints have been destroyed.
And yet again, old-school crime solving is futile, leaving it for cutting-edge DNA technology to save the day. But genealogist CeCe Moore's been able to identify 2 of Ben's second cousins. She traces their family trees all the way to their great-grandparents, then builds the family trees forward with their descendants. Poring over obituaries, gravesite locators, and census records, CeCe has pared it down to 2 women, sisters, one who would likely be Ben's aunt, the other his mother.
How certain did you feel that you had the right 2 women that probably would wind up being his mother?
I felt completely certain that I had the right 2 women. Because of the way the family trees came together, there was just no other explanation.
For Ben, the meteoric moment is here.
I'm going to see if she's willing to talk to me. I've been less nervous doing operations in Baghdad than I am right now.
Unannounced, Ben is rolling the dice, pulling into the office building where one of the sisters works, certain she's either his aunt or his biological mom.
Tell me what you're feeling as you're dialing that number and you're waiting.
The keys on the phone felt pretty heavy as I was pushing them. Here we go. Hi, my name is Ben 𝐃𝐃. I've been put in touch with you by some people at a mutual acquaintance. I'm looking for some distant family or some long-lost family members.
So she answers.
I hear the voice, middle-aged woman's voice, and I was a little standoffish at first, trying to figure out who I was.
The startled woman on the other end of the line immediately denies that she or her sister could possibly be Ben's mother.
The only reason I'm so adamant about it is that the DNA brings us to a path that leads here, and I'm not trying to be accusatorial, and there's no malice or negativity on my end. I'm holding on to just a thread of hope, and that right now, that's all I have.
It's devastatingly apparent that the woman, either his mother or his aunt, wants nothing to do with Ben.
Sorry for inconveniencing you this afternoon. Bye. She's very, extremely adamant that her and her sister are a dead end. But people can lie, DNA doesn't. I just don't know. I'm crawling back inside of myself. I'm starting to feel nothing again. Which is okay, that'll pass.
Minutes later, though, a heart-stopping, paralyzing moment. Ben's cell phone rings. Could the woman have had a change of heart? Instead, the woman's sister calling back, telling Ben to never contact them again.
Just out of curiosity, and she hung up on me. She said that I need to go back to where I'm from and love my family and love the people that raised me.
So there was no warmth or no acceptance at all on this phone call?
No. The meat and potatoes of the conversation were, I was messed up for coming and interfering with other people's lives and digging things up that shouldn't be dug up.
Did that lead you to believe that she probably was your biological mom, or maybe not? The fact that she was so defensive.
Her reaction led me to the conclusion that she's probably the mother.
Did you feel rejected?
Yeah. You shouldn't have to have that feeling twice. Rejection, abandonment, not being wanted, a special kind of loneliness. I felt that loneliness again in the car. That wound is probably still open.
For the adoptee, they want answers, but for the mothers, this is probably one of the most difficult things that they've ever had to deal with.
When they get contact from their child, it really is opening Pandora's box. They have to face a lot of deeply buried emotions. They've carried a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and fear.
And a big secret.
A big secret, and it could disrupt the lives that they've built since.
Ben reaches out to his adoptive father back in Idaho.
I told him if I had to go back in time and do it over again, I wouldn't change anybody in my life. Everything that I am is because of you guys.
I don't know that we created or just helped you along. You know, you're a great person. You got a bigger family now.
Yeah, because the world's given me so much, and I was blind to that for 30 years now. It's never been so clear until now that I've never really been alone.
All right, son. I love you.
I love you too.
Next, for Andrea, the dark story of her mother's past is only beginning to unfold.
So you began to suspect there could be other children.
We knew that there was 5 children already, but there was a 13-year gap between Heather and Andrea.
Are there more siblings possibly born during that gap?
Every 2 years, on the clock, she's having babies.
Stay with us. Andrea 𝐔𝐋𝐋 journey to find her biological family has taken emotional twists and turns she never could have imagined. Her family tree rapidly growing.
I grew up an only child, and now I have so many siblings.
She has 3 newfound siblings, Heather, Aaron, and Dennis, and now, incredibly, she's about to meet a 4th, a 32-year-old sister.
Heather, just out of the blue, sent me a message on Facebook and said, "Are you sitting down?" And then I found out I have another sister.
Andrea's traveled to Washington State, and once again, she's knocking on a stranger's door.
Hi! Oh my gosh.
It's
so nice to meet you.
We actually look a lot
alike. Can you believe all of this?
No.
I never thought that I would find anything out ever.
Her sister's name is Mauricia, and her abandonment is remarkably similar to Andrea's. Birth mom Cindy arrives at this hospital in Spokane under an alias, gives birth, and then hours later vanishes.
The name was fake.
Did you ever search that name?
Sandy Davis. It's such a common name.
Same with Amy Beach.
Yeah, exactly. And she said she's from California.
The 2 sisters marvel at their mirroring stories and reflections.
Bumpy nose.
Yes. Looking at her was so surreal to see these features that I see in myself every day. I think Andrea and I did have a connection when we first saw each other. We're both hesitant and a little bit shy, and I think that actually, helps us kind of understand each other a little bit more.
And believe it or not, another stunning find. A 5th sibling, a 35-year-old brother that Cindy gave birth to and abandoned at another hospital. Another child that Dwight never knew he fathered.
It's one thing that you missed it one time.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 times, but to miss her pregnancy 5 times?
Yeah, right.
That's really pretty stunning.
I just didn't know she was pregnant, couldn't tell.
Do you see them as your children?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're my kids.
Good to see you again.
Oh, yeah, she sure is.
Andrea's search has led to an unforeseen family reunion.
Yeah, nice to meet
And for
you.
her adoptive mom, Beverly, a chance to thank the man who brought her daughter into the world.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
You did a great job of raising her.
It takes nature and nurture. And together, we've produced a very beautiful young woman. We're part of her story. It's just a miracle that we've all found each other.
As for Ben Tveit, though the search for his birth mother ended with a harsh rejection, he rejoices in the discovery of a special man, a second father who embraces him fully.
Are you happy you set out on this journey?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I could go to my grave happy, knowing all that I know now. Some foundlings don't ever get that closure. I really feel that connection to another human being in this world. I'm thinking law school after.
Ah, now we're talking. There's a future for you, Ben. One thing at a time.
I value myself that much more after meeting him.
In the case of Andrea and Ben, both sought out to find their birth mothers.
Right.
The best of the best. Hoorah.
both found birth fathers.
Yes, with open arms. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right on.
I always hope that there can be at least one connection to the biological family. Somebody that welcomes them. I've seen such closure and peace of mind come to these people that are searching when they get that.
Peace and closure, but there's definitely more to come on this, Amy.
And that's because Andrea has yet to meet that fifth sibling, her other brother who lives overseas, but hopes to meet him soon. That's our program for tonight. I'm Amy Robach.
And I'm David Muir. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, thanks for watching. Have a good evening and a great week.
Joseph DeAngelo was in the Navy. He was a police officer. He was married.
He was like a Hannibal Lecter, highly intelligent, highly sadistic, master manipulator.
His first rape attack that we know of, he was 30 years old.
This was a man who was clearly living a double life.
A man in a leather hood entered the window of a house in Citrus Heights and sneaked up on a 16-year-old girl watching television alone in the den. He pointed a knife at her and issued a chilling warning. Make one move and you'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark.
Crime after crime, it was that same terrifying MO.
I saw a flashlight shining down the hall, and I thought, now that's odd.
The leather gloves are really, really remembered because they made kind of a sound, you know, when they moved.
He started ripping sheets or towels, I'm not sure, but it was very methodical and it was very slow.
It was a time when a vast area was terrified of one evil being.
This was a criminal who went by many different names.
He was known as the East Area Rapist in Sacramento County, the original Night Stalker in Orange County.
A 29-year-old wife was raped while her tied-up husband had to listen.
A 17-year-old girl was attacked here. He would put his knees on the victim's chest, and he had a gun in one hand, a flashlight in the other.
Peepings, prowlings, stalking. Over 100 burglaries.
Police think he checked the home out before he strikes.
He put plates on the man's back, and he told the man, if I hear these rattle, I will kill your wife.
At least 13 homicides.
This is a sustained campaign of cruelty and viciousness that lasted for decades.
Welcome to Crime Scene, a podcast that examines real-life crimes. I'm Michelle McNamara of TrueCrimeDiary.com.
Michelle McNamara was a true crime blogger.
She was a writer and producer. She was a citizen detective and a true crime writer.
Very much being a mom during the day, very much writing about true crime at night. She was working on all different types of unsolved cases. Then she found a case that really dug its claws into her.
What turned him on was terror. The East Area Rapist original Night Stalker is California's most prolific serial offender. He murdered more people than the Zodiac Killer, but has little name recognition. Partly that's because he moved between communities, and his crimes spanned 10 years.
Everything about it is mystery, and it has such a boogeyman aspect to it.
Michelle used to talk about this case, and the thing that boggled her mind is that people didn't know about it. This was one of the most horrific serial killers in history, and nobody talked about him.
It's summer, 1976. It was the bicentennial. It's all about happy days. Laverne and Shirley.
Hassenbeff Incorporated.
In those days, the middle class in America was thriving.
We felt safe, but the crime rates were going up.
But suburban Sacramento was considered a safe place in the mid-70s.
You could ride your bike all over town.
My parents would just tell us be home before dark.
People didn't lock their doors, they left their windows open, especially people close to the river. We'd get the Delta breeze.
Everything changed in the summer of 1976.
An attack occurred in Rancho Cordova.
A young lady woke up, and there's a guy standing in the doorway, and he blindfolded her, tied her up,
and then sexually assaults her. This is the first known sexual assault attributed to the man we know as the East Area Rapist.
Nobody knew about the first attack except the police. The first attack, the second, the third, the fourth.
When this first started in Sacramento, a lot of the people didn't know what was going on. They didn't put it in the paper at the time.
The press had not yet covered it because Sacramento County Sheriff's Department asked them not to.
There was a reason for that. That if you put it in there, the suspect's going to know that you're looking for him.
At the time the rape started happening in Sacramento Sheriff's Department didn't have a specialized sexual assault unit. Just whoever had a free caseload, that could take on another case. And so I did not become involved with these cases until rape number 5, when it was Jane Carson.
I was 30 years old. I was married with a 3-year-old son. My husband was stationed at McClellan Air Force Base.
Jane was a nurse. She was a colonel in the Air Force Reserve.
It was about 6:30 in the morning. My 3-year-old son hopped in bed with me for a snuggle. I heard the garage door close, and I knew my husband had just left for work. I saw a flashlight shining down the hall, and I thought, now that's odd, and I screamed out to my husband, "What have you forgotten?" And there was no answer.
Then the rapist, all dressed in ski mask and dark clothes, shining a flashlight at her.
He told us with clenched teeth, "Shut up, or I'll kill you."
He tells her to turn over, and he's going to tie her up.
He gags us, both of us. He blindfolds us, and he ties us up with shoelaces, very tight. His next move was to move my son. I was already scared to death, but this is where the fear really took place.
All she's thinking about is the life of her little boy and saving him.
After the rape was over, praise the Lord, he moved my son back next to me. I could feel his body, and then I was relieved. So we hobbled around to the front fence, screamed for a neighbor. She called the police. And then Carol Daly, the female detective, showed up. And I call her my angel.
One of my great heroes of this story is Carol Daly. She was an investigator for the Sheriff Department in Sacramento. She was asked to go out and interview the victims.
Maybe something that the man said, or something that he did to you, or something that you recall hearing.
Through that process, she was able to glean a lot of information, like what he would say to his victims. And sometimes he would call out a name.
In one of the cases, the victim said that she heard him crying and saying Bonnie.
For years, detectives didn't know what to make of this name. Who's Bonnie?
Bonnie was not a victim, but a mystery woman at the center of the case.
Bonnie was the girlfriend and then fiance of Joseph DeAngelo.
One of the first women to get a real glimpse of the psychopathy behind Joe DeAngelo was Bonnie Caldwell.
She's 18, really smart, going to a community college, studying nursing. And she's in the middle of the quad, and this older guy ambles up to her and begins a conversation.
Bonnie talked about her relationship with Joe DeAngelo in the HBO docuseries I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
He was very gregarious, outgoing to all my friends. We'd been together close to a year. He gave me a high solitaire engagement ring. And he told me that we're going to be married.
They were both students at the time. He was studying criminal justice. So Joe was someone who initially was impressive to Bonnie. He was exciting. He had a motorcycle. He taught her to shoot. But the longer she dated him, the more trouble began materializing.
He takes her on thrill rides. And this is where the relationship starts to show its hand with Joe.
Joe, without saying a word to me, just turned right, went down a very steep bank that I had no idea what he was doing.
He's obviously thrilled not just by the speed, but he's thrilled by Bonnie's terror.
The rules were never for him. So many of the things that we did together, he pushed me toward fear.
As they're riding on a motorcycle, the German Shepherd comes out from the side of the road and nips at the tires, and Joe swings a foot out and breaks the dog's neck instantly. There's such an efficiency to his movement that stuns her.
Eventually, Bonnie said, "I don't want to be with you anymore."
She actually broke their engagement. He showed up at her house in the middle of the night. He had a gun, and he told her that she had to marry him.
Just inches from my face, there was the barrel of a gun pointing at me, and it was Joe. What he said to me was, "Get your clothes on, get dressed, we're going to Reno, and we're going to get married tonight."
Her dad was able to break it up and send Joe on his way. I think it's a foreshadowing that he was going to use violence against people in the future.
Bonnie breaks her engagement with Joe D'Angelo, and within just a few years, strange crimes start happening in Rancho Cordova.
He would empty female underwear drawers and perfectly line up the underwear down the hallway.
It's all control and power. This is my house now. These are my items now. He's the king of the house.
Every obsession needs a room of its own. Mine was strewn with coloring paper on which I'd scribbled down California penal codes in crayon. It was around midnight on July 3rd, 2012, when I opened a document I'd compiled listing all the unique items he'd stolen over the years.
He would take mementos, almost like they were trophies from inside the home.
He would steal rings with engravings on them.
He stole driver's license, he stole photos from albums.
There is a fantasy component about these crimes.
I still have a part of you. I have your jewelry, I have your driver's license, I have, something that means something to you. And now I own it.
He was a serial rapist known as the 𝐅, attacking women and girls. First in East Sacramento County. This place meant something to him. He attacked here first and kept coming back. Was it home? Some of the investigators, especially the ones who worked the case in the beginning, think so.
We were always trying to figure out why victims were chosen and why the locations were chosen.
For Joe D'Angelo, this was his home, right in his own backyard. He lived in 3 or 4 houses in this exact same area where many of the rapes were committed.
He grew up in Rancho Cordova. He was familiar with the playgrounds, the schools, the empty lots. This is the home of the first documented rape that occurred in Sacramento County. He was very agile. He could jump over fences. He knew which way to go from whatever neighborhood he was in. He knew that the best way to get in and out.
He knew this area like the back of his hand. He grew up there.
Joseph D'Angelo Jr. grew up the son of a master sergeant in the Air Force who moved around a lot.
We met Joe when he was 13 years old. My father was stationed at Mayfair Air Force Base, and then his father was transferred there, and we shared a duplex.
The girl who became very close to him at the time, Judy, described a very lonely boy.
He was missing a family. His mother and father had split when he was young.
At a very young age, he was neglected. He and his siblings would be locked in the closet and then beaten by the father.
Per his siblings, Joe D'Angelo received the worst of his vitriol and anger when they were growing up.
Joe was always over at our house, and he just became a good family friend. He never talked about himself. He never talked about any problems he might have. He never discussed anything that was bothering him. They started reporting, the peeping Toms here in Rancho. And I remember I was in the bedroom and I was asleep, and I had this feeling. I woke up because I had this feeling somebody was there. And when I looked up and glanced towards the window, I saw this outlined figure. I didn't do anything to let them know I saw them, that I was aware of them. So the next morning I came in here and I says, "Dad," I says, "somebody was peeking in my window last night." And he says, "What?" And I says, "Yeah." And there was footprints out there in the dirt, 2 distinct footprints there.
It's very common for sexual offenders to start out, particularly in adolescence, as peepers or voyeurs that are creeping around the neighborhood, looking in windows, watching women undress, almost like a training ground.
Many of us had never seen anything like this before in our career. His whole thing was terror. It wasn't the sex, it was the terror that he wanted to put in these people that was his #1 priority.
His victims ranged in age from 13, I think, to 39.
Out of the first 10 attacks, 6 of those were juveniles.
Oftentimes, sex offenders or sexual serial murderers will start out with, I guess, easier victims that are younger, that are more vulnerable, victims that he can control.
My name is Chris Pedretti. I was 15. I was a kid, just a normal kid, cartwheels in the front yard, and really not a care in the world. It was not ever even a thought that our world might be unsafe.
So it was a week before Christmas. She'd been left home alone.
I was supposed to go to a high school dance, and it was the last day before Christmas vacation. I put a pizza in the oven, and I went to go play the piano. I remember hearing a noise, and I stopped playing and listened. Didn't hear it again. No, it was nothing. So I kept playing. It was very shortly after that, probably seconds, that he approached me.
She turned around and she saw a man in a ski mask.
I froze. The brain stopped thinking at that point. I mean, I just went straight into survival mode. I don't remember thinking at that point anything other than kind of turning into a robot. Just do what he says, do what he says. It was like Chris had left the body, and it was just the body left.
That individual led her to the back patio. She tied her up.
I didn't know about rape. I certainly didn't know about sex. What he did to me, what he took from me, I can't ever get it back. He kind of ruined my childhood. You know, he took it away.
Everybody knew something was going on, but nobody knew exactly what.
The sheriff decided that we would hold community forums. I had no idea there were going to be several hundred people that would show up.
If we have a gun, could we shoot him? Knowing what I know about this man, if I had a gun, I definitely would shoot him. And I would not shoot to injure, I would shoot to take care of him.
He liked this. He liked the police being on edge. He liked the town being on edge.
I have a gun, but I still don't feel safe being, at home alone.
Law enforcement was bracing for more attacks as his rampage of violence continued. His tactics were changing, and no one knew what he would do next.
So I have to admit, I'm scared to death.
The young girl made one bad move after another. Her attitude was much too inviting. She should never have stopped to window shop at night.
In the 1970s, when a woman reported rape, she was shamed, she was blamed. Often she was ostracized by her own community.
Rape cases really weren't considered serious. They were misdemeanor. You had to make an arrest within a year, or else they were not prosecuted. Even if an arrest was made, the defense was always it was the victim's fault.
Rape was such a prevalent crime back in those days that there were multiple serial rapists operating in California.
217 were reported last year. That's about one every day and a half.
In the Bay Area, you had the stinky rapist who smelled like diesel fuel.
I had pillowcase rapist. We had the key car rapist.
When the East Area Rapist became active in Sacramento, he quickly upstaged all the other rapists in the area because of how terrifying his MO was.
Concern over rape is mounting in this community.
There was panic in the city of Sacramento. The fact that they couldn't catch this guy just ignited the city in fear.
No one knows where or when he'll strike again.
They were getting guard dogs. They were putting in alarm systems in their homes.
Have the dog in the house, the big dog.
The worst thing is not knowing. All you can do is take every possible precaution and then hope that he gets caught before he gets to you.
Every day in the newspaper, it was number 8, it was number 10, it was number 15, 20. You know, it just kept going on and on and on.
It seemed like every time investigators thought they were getting close, he would disappear. But he kept attacking again and again.
He was elusive, like a puff of smoke in the night.
Detective Carol Daly wanted this serial rapist behind bars, and she was relentless in her pursuit of him, but constantly frustrated by the fact that they couldn't catch him.
The officers in this department that are working on this case are frustrated because there's just no evidence to give any firm lead. We're doing everything humanly possible to catch this man.
He was a phantom.
Descriptions ranged pretty widely. One person thought he was Hispanic.
And now all of a sudden, he's blonde hair, blue-eyed. There are like 8, 9, 10 drawings of him. And they have completely changed.
The best descriptions that we had were his height and his possible weight. We knew he wore a size 9 shoe.
When the police were taking the victim's statements, many of the women described his penis as being very, very small.
We said, all right, if he is so underendowed, we went to a doctor who specialized in what I would call infantile penises to see if he had any patients that came in. And we didn't have any luck there.
It's a very serious situation. I think it's very dangerous. The last thing I think of when I'm going to bed is I look at the doorway in my bedroom and I think that he could be standing there.
Detective Daly was following every lead.
We filled out a long background form for the victims. Where did they go to school? What did they look like? What age were they? You know, what was their build? There was no pattern among any of the victims because he was just prowling. He would see them and follow them home.
Margaret Wardlow, she was just 13 years old when she was attacked by the East Area rapists.
Margaret was probably the strongest young victim I have ever talked to.
Growing up in Sacramento was great. Where we lived was ideal. It was right next to the American River. Go down there with my dog after school, go fishing. Totally felt safe.
Margaret had a curiosity about her. She wanted to know about the East Area rapists.
I was a reader of everything I could get my hands on that had to do with this individual. Like, what was making this guy tick? Why was he doing this?
She herself became a victim. I believe there was a pre-wired strength in her mind that helped her survive this attack.
It was a school night, just my mother and myself. I went to bed at like a regular school night hour. I was awoken about 2:30 in the morning with a flashlight in my face. I thought it was a joke. I thought my mom had asked him to like come in and wake me up and scare me or something.
As he tied her up and then went into the mother's room, Margaret knew that either her or her mother were going to be the victim.
The rapist tied up her mother and put plates on her back as a warning device.
He did that with so many of the victims when there was more than one person in the house. If he heard anybody moving, he was right back and told them, don't move, I'm gonna kill you, I'll kill you.
Putting the dishes on someone's back, he knows he has to do something, either hurt them, flee. So as much of the bravado as he's trying to convey, he's scared of the physical confrontation.
A little voice inside of me said, you know, you get out of a lot of stuff, Margaret, but you're not going to get out of this one. The whole time he'd been threatening me. He'd been saying, do you want to die? He wanted fear. He wanted to see fear in me.
This is your psychological sadist. He is enjoying controlling that woman like that.
This guy was so beyond the pale, and that was why Michelle was so interested in him, is because he was so frightening.
The way he walks around people's houses and the way he destroys them and sort of hangs out and eats, there's something so psychologically fascinating about that to me. It's like he got to the emotional center of people's lives and just wanted to destroy that.
Michelle caught the bug. She started going down the rabbit holes in this case. At this point, instead of writing a book, she was investigating the case.
I'm obsessed. It's not healthy. I know the strangest details about him. I know his blood type. I know his penis size. He vaulted fences. He escaped foot chases. But I believe it's the rare moments when he was human that will be his downfall in the end.
As time went on, this East Area rapist started to crisscross Sacramento, attacking women home alone or women with their kids in the middle of the night.
He seemed to be expanding what his capabilities were when he was carrying out these crimes.
He became much more aggressive, and his tactics. He did more horrible things than I can even describe.
This tells us that the offender is adapting and learning as he is committing crimes. He really messes with people's minds, both the investigators and the victims.
Part of the thrill of the game for him was a kind of connect-the-dots puzzle he played with people. He stole 2 packs of Winston cigarettes from the first victim and left them outside the 4th victim's house. Junk jewelry stolen from a neighbor 2 weeks earlier was left at the 5th victim's house. It was a power play, a signal of ubiquity. I am both nowhere and everywhere. You may not think you have something in common with your neighbor, but you do. Me.
Michelle started as a blogger talking about cases that no one else was paying attention to and trying to get people motivated to look at those cases.
The case dragged me under quickly. Curiosity turned to clawing hunger. I was on the hunt, absorbed by a click fever that connected my propulsive tapping with a dopamine rush. I wasn't alone. I found a group of hardcore seekers who congregated on an online message board and exchanged clues and theories on the case.
Citizen sleuths, they are ordinary people that go to work, they go home, they put their kids to bed, and then they go on the computer. And they spend hours and hours trying to solve certain crimes.
My name is Paul Haynes. I was Michelle McNamara's research collaborator. When I first began learning about the case, there was a specific forum dedicated to the East Area Rapist. It was the most active forum on that website.
Paul Haynes was a writer living in Florida, and Michelle recognized that he had a great proclivity for digging into old archives and things. It was a case that a lot of citizen detectives got into because there were so many clues.
Aaron's wasn't a supervillain. He was a man, a guy with habits and traits and preferences that, with enough examination, should shine like Hansel's breadcrumbs in the woods.
My name is 𝐄𝐏𝐒, and I call myself a researcher. I started seeing patterns emerging to me where I became convinced it was solvable because all of the crimes had common bonds.
He was leaving ligatures at the scene with this particular knot.
He would eat food out of the victims' refrigerators. I was spending every waking hour trying to find men who fit the criteria. And it was at that time that I first connected with Michelle.
It's a fascinating community. I had been on those boards for a while following the story because everyone had such great information.
Michelle's quest was to get this case solved. She just had an abiding curiosity in letting the details lead us to the perpetrator.
The East Area Rapist would target not people, but neighborhoods. You can see the proximity of these homes to green belts like drainage ditches and creeks and canals.
We believe he used the canal as an escape route, which ran along the back of so many properties. He was a great escape artist.
These are passageways that this killer used to surveil the residents unseen, cloaked by the darkness of these green belts.
He was able to look over those fences, look into those homes, look at what time people ate dinner. I mean, he knew what time the husband left.
The Sacramento Sheriff's Office has invested more than 40,000 man-hours in the search for the East Area Rapist.
Sacramento would have a helicopter up in the sky, and they all knew it was because they were chasing the East Area Rapist.
It was terrible. It was terrible to hear that. Well, he didn't like it either. And it turns out that he served in Vietnam. He left Sacramento because of that helicopter. And then these things started up in the East Bay of San Francisco.
There are two things known about the rapist. One is he has never been caught in a home where there was a man present. The other is he's never been in a home where there has been a big dog.
The East Area Rapist worked on challenges. Everything he saw in the paper, if we said he didn't do something, he did it the next time.
When the newspapers reported that he was just attacking single females, he took this as a challenge.
At attack number 16, he started to attack with a man present, and then 2/3 of the attacks he does since then has a man present. He is purposefully choosing couples.
My name's 𝐄𝐏𝐒𝐈𝐃.
And my name's Bob Hardwick, and we've been married 41 years this August. Happily married 41 years.
Bob and Gay Hardwick were a couple living in Stockton, California.
We had picked out a home in one of the little picture-perfect tree-lined streets. We were just happy in our new home, living together. The day of our attack was March 18th, 1978, and we were attack number 31. We had gone out to dinner and a movie, normal Friday night, and we came home around 10 o'clock and went to bed. Later that night, we were awakened by a very bright light right in our faces and a voice saying, "Wake up, wake up."
The attack on Bob and Gay Hardwick was much like all the other attacks in that he confronted Bob and Gay when they were in bed. He ordered her at gunpoint to bind Bob.
Nothing you can do when there's a .357 Magnum pointed
at your head.
He then bound Gay. He retied Bob.
Turns him over, puts the plates on his back as a warning device.
Things would go silent for a period of time, and then as soon as they moved, he was right in their face. Move and I'll kill you.
Ultimately, he moved Gay into the living room where he sexually assaulted her.
You're convinced at that moment that this is not a full human being that you're dealing with.
He can not only humiliate a woman who's about to rape, but he can also completely, in his mind, emasculate her partner, putting him in a position where he is helpless and has to listen to what's going on in a different room.
These attacks are happening in the macho 1970s. $6 million man.
We have the capability to make the world's first bionic man.
Well, talk to me, good buddy.
And Burt Reynolds, these are the icons. And the men were not looked at as victims. They were looked at as just being weak for not being able to protect their wives and their girlfriends.
I never talked to anybody about it over the years. I just wanted to put it out of my mind,
It was, we're going to get through this. We're going to get back to normal. And you don't ever really make it to normal.
It was tough, but, I loved her, and I said we're going to get through it.
Our home never felt the same again. Every surface that you could think of was covered in fingerprint dust. It just looked like a smoke bomb had been set off in our house. It was contaminated and ruined for us.
He wasn't out attacking people on lovers' lanes or in parks. He was attacking people where they feel the most safe, in bed with their partner in their home. And he was able to say, you know what? I have so much power, I can take all of that security away and devastate your life.
Why couldn't they catch him? Somehow, he was always one step ahead of law enforcement, and they wondered, could he be one of us?
After the East Area Rapist would terrorize these women, sometimes he would call them and taunt them.
Hello? Hello?
This rapist did not stop with just the assault of that night. He terrorized them their whole lives.
This is that psychological sadist at work. He is getting off on continuing to cause fear in his victim.
I'm Michelle McNamara of TrueCrimeDiary.com. Larry Crompton is a retired lieutenant for the Contra Costa Sheriff's Department. He worked on the Rapist Task Force in the 70s.
How optimistic are you that he may be caught one day?
Very, very optimistic.
I had worked many crimes while I was on the department, but none of them were really like this. I knew what these people went through, and I knew what the family was going through. I couldn't let it go. And for many years, it was me. What did I miss? What did I do wrong? Why didn't I catch him?
Helicopters, roadblocks, citizen patrols taking down plate numbers, hypnotists, psychics, nothing. You were a scent and shoe impressions. Bloodhounds and detectives tracked both. They led away. They led nowhere.
He next shows up down in Modesto in June of 1978. He attacks a couple down there. And then 48 hours later, he's up in the town of Davis, over 110 driving miles away, and is attacking a UC Davis co-ed there.
Early Wednesday morning, the infamous masked man made his 44th attack on a young couple living in Mission San Jose.
It was as if he knew what police were doing. And all along, many of the detectives who were working the case thought that maybe he was a police officer or military. And ultimately, that turned out to be true.
You should have seen me coming.
One of the things that's important to remember when you're looking at Joseph D'Angelo is he actually graduated with an associate degree in police science.
He had told Bonnie that his aspiration was to join the California Highway Patrol.
You should have seen me coming.
He studied evidence and he studied crime scene.
He went to Northern California, and he applied with the Auburn Police Department and was hired there. And then that's when he started his rapes.
He actually started out committing crimes as a teenager. At some point, he even blew up a dog with a firework, killed the dog while he was committing a residential burglary.
You should have seen me coming.
It makes sense that somebody who has a need for control, wants to be in power, would be attracted to a position that allows him to have that every single day.
When I was working the cases, I thought he's got to be in law enforcement.
The first clue was in attack number 3 in Sacramento. He had gloves on to protect from fingerprints, and he's got a gun in one hand and a padded baton.
You had better catch him. He is going to kill. He wants to kill.
It was never enough to commit the horrible crimes. It always had to be, and let me do something more.
We all want to think that we would recognize a serial killer based on how this person looks.
I wonder if he was out stalking his next victim. I don't know, because everything seems so normal.
The scariest aspects of serial killers is they don't look different.
From the very beginning, I knew DNA was going to solve this case.
Police had been sitting on this genetic fingerprint for 4 decades.
Holy smokes, this is like the big break.
He's been living there under everybody's noses.
This is the Golden State Killer?
I just want to tell you, buddy, to rot in hell.
Michelle McNamara was a true crime blogger.
She was a citizen detective and a true crime writer.
She was talking to her publisher about writing a book that didn't have an ending.
My interest in crime has personal roots. The unsolved murder of a neighbor when I was 14 sparked a fascination with cold cases. What gripped me was the specter of that question mark where the killer's face should be. I need to see his face. He loses his power when we know his face.
When I'm puzzling over the details of an unsolved crime, I'm like a rat in a maze given a task. The world narrows, the search propels. I felt in the truest sense of the word gripped. I had a murder habit and it was bad. I would feed it for the rest of my life.
I considered Michelle McNamara a friend. She impacted the Golden State Killer case. One way we're able to keep on investigating the case is to have public interest, to have the online interest, and she helped push that.
On a sleepless night last July, I Googled a description of a pair of cufflinks he stole. Then a jolt of recognition. There they were. I bought them immediately. The best thing to do, I knew, was to turn the cufflinks over to an authority on the killer.
As soon as I saw those cufflinks, I thought, this is pretty astonishing. I photographed those and sent those to surviving victims because it was potentially a very good lead in the case.
Unfortunately, the cufflinks didn't pan out. The victims looked at them and they weren't the cufflinks that were stolen.
And she was devastated. I don't know if Michelle was convinced she could solve the case, but I believe that she was convinced she could make a difference and that she wanted to do it for the victims.
He forced the woman at knife point to tie up her boyfriend, then he tied her up and raped her.
The East Area rapist has struck 40 times in the last 2.5 years, and he hasn't been caught yet.
He started inflicting real physical pain on the victims, like punching, giving black eyes.
One of the most sadistic things I think that he would do would be to say to them, I'm going to cut off a piece of your wife and bring it back to you.
We knew that he was becoming more and more angry.
As fear in the community intensified, Detective Carol Daly held regular public forums.
One thing I want to emphasize, ladies, is for you not to be polite. If you are going to defend yourself, you injure him enough to incapacitate him in any way that you can.
I started working with these cases, and I thought, if I can talk to one of the people that deal with these rapists, maybe I can get into the head of what I'm looking for. Vacaville Medical Center is where they have rapists that have been convicted.
The men were asked what they thought was motivating the East Area rapists.
The mere fact that he ties his victims up has to have them completely submissive. You can sense the conquest he had.
You're not what you think you are, and you won't accept it, so you strike out to prove to them that you are, but in reality you aren't. And until you face that, you're going to keep on going and going.
If I'm willing to kill you, the first move you make, you're going to be dead.
The doctor told me, you had better catch him. He is going to kill. He wants to kill.
He first becomes a burglar, and then he progresses to sexual assault, and then proceeds to escalate to murder.
The East Area rapist disappeared from Northern California in July of 1979. He showed up in Santa Barbara in October of '79, and shortly thereafter, he starts killing.
The Pacific Ocean was warming up, an inviting churn of white caps making its way toward soft sand and an endless line of 100-foot palm trees. Golden teenage boys with blank hair and effortless muscles headed for the water with their boards in a gait the locals called the Surfer Bounce. This was Santa Barbara's magic time.
Dr. Offerman was an orthopedic surgeon. He had begun dating a psychologist named Alexandra Manning.
On the morning of December 30th, 1979, some friends of Robert Offerman's had shown up at his condo for a tennis game. There was no answer at the door.
I went in the sliding door,
and looked around the living room.
On the floor, there were Christmas ornaments that had fallen off on the ground.
Some bones right by the sliding door, which I thought he would leave it there, so we knew something was wrong. So I took a right towards his bedroom, and that's when I saw Miss Manning on the bed, and he was on the floor.
Offerman and Manning both were shot and killed.
It was the holidays. As authorities processed the crime scene, they stepped around a turkey carcass wrapped in cellophane that had been discarded on the patio. They concluded that at some point the killer had opened the refrigerator and helped himself to Dr. Offerman's leftover Christmas dinner.
It was never enough to commit the horrible crimes. It always had to be, and let me do something more. Let me go into your refrigerator and eat your holiday meal. The level of depravity that this man had and the execution of it was despicable and shocking.
Larry Crompton, who led the 𝐅 task force in Contra Costa County, reached out to Santa Barbara investigators and told them, this sounds like the East Area rapist that we've been dealing with.
When I called Santa Barbara and talked to the lieutenant and said, I heard that you had a double homicide, would like to know about it because we think it's our rapist that is down there. And he said, don't know what you're talking about. Haven't had anything like that. Nope.
Law enforcement agencies weren't necessarily as connected as they are now. I think there was still this thought that these are isolated instances throughout California.
And that was it. It was so frustrating.
I am sure that Larry Crompton called many jurisdictions because he truly believed that the rapist would move on and become a killer.
Santa Barbara is an enclave of rich people. You've got Ronald Reagan. You've got people that are worried about their property values. They don't want news about a double murder in a house going wide. Pretty soon it gets off the front page.
He gets a taste for not only murdering people, but murdering them after these prolonged, terrifying times in their homes.
In 1979, a new and terrifying chapter. He starts a killing spree.
2 double murders in Goleta, the 1 double murder in Ventura, the murder in Irvine, and the double murder in Dana Point.
The rampage of violence was brutal and unstoppable.
4 horrible murders within a 6-block radius in a suburban middle-class neighborhood.
We knew it was the same person, but we couldn't prove it.
Profilers of that day said, I know of no one who does what this offender does.
I thought once he started killing, there's no way he can stop, and he's going to continue to do it.
Most violent criminals smash through life like human sledgehammers. They're caught easily, but every so often a blue moon surfaces. A snow leopard slinks by.
After 1981, we don't have an attack for 5 years.
Well, I think people slow down in life. You don't have that sort of energy to be prowling. Like, you literally can't be out at 3 a.m. like running across roofs because you're not 18 anymore.
I don't believe that his sexual deviances went away, but I can believe that he found other, less risky ways of satisfying those urges.
Could he have moved out of the state, out of the country? Could he have died, got medicated? I mean, I don't know.
In 1981, Joe D'Angelo became a father. The first of his 3 daughters was born. The second of his 3 daughters was born in '86. And then his 3rd daughter was born in 1989.
He had a wife who was a lawyer. He lived a middle-class existence.
He sent all his girls through Montessori schools, and he would take them to their different sports events, the horseback riding, the roller skating.
We all want to think that we would recognize a serial killer based on how this person looks. And yet, so often, this is somebody who's living in the community, who knows his neighbors, and I think that is one of the scariest aspects of serial killers, is they don't look different from other people.
My sister and I, Melody, used to take turns going out and babysitting while Sharon was in school. And I didn't start thinking about it till after he was arrested. Because when they started showing all these dates, I'm going, oh my goodness. I wonder if he was out stalking his next victim. I don't know.
It's been 5 years with no more rapes or murders by Joseph DeAngelo.
For some reason, he runs across beautiful 18-year-old 𝐄𝐏𝐿 𝐄𝐏 and can't help himself and kills her.
𝐄𝐏𝐿 was kind of a shy girl. She was very pretty, very popular.
The brief life of 𝐄𝐏𝐿 𝐄𝐏 was no less tragic than her death. Her biological father was long out of the picture.
Her parents had gone to a cruise with her 6-year-old brother, and she was staying at the residence alone.
And for the first time, left my daughter alone, because that was another thing that I never did, because I was worried that if I was gone, that something might happen.
𝐄𝐏𝐿 𝐄𝐏 had had a friend over to the house and heard noises in the backyard.
They got up to inspect that, saw nothing.
And sometime that night, 𝐄𝐏𝐿 was confronted by an intruder. She was raped, and then she was bludgeoned to death.
And I got that telephone call that every mother and any family member is just devastated by.
The 𝐄𝐏𝐿 case just felt like such an outlier because he had decided to go after couples, and then he had stopped for a really long time, and then he attacks 𝐄𝐏𝐿. And then that seemingly is his last attack.
Some think you died or went to prison. Not me. I think you bailed when the world began to change.
In the 1970s, there was no DNA.
The investigators had evidence but couldn't connect the crime scenes. They needed the science to catch up.
DNA didn't enter the forensic landscape until about 1986, 1987.
It would take 15 years for DNA to finally link the Northern California East Area Rapist series with the Southern California homicides, as all being done by one man.
I was immediately on the phone to Larry Poole down at Orange County Sheriff's Office, and we're talking about, holy smokes, this is like the big break.
But detectives still had no idea who he was.
I got a little excited maybe in the first 18 to 24 months, but over the years I chronicled and logged over 8,700 suspects in the investigation.
After 5 years, we got no match, and after 10 years, we got no match, and we just were not getting a hit.
When people have asked whether it worries me that the killer may still be out there, I wave dismissively, pointing out that he'd be much older now. He can't hurt me, I say, not realizing that in every sleepless hour, in every minute spent hunting him and not cuddling my daughter, he already has.
Michelle McNamara was a mom, married to actor Patton Oswalt, investigating this case and working on a book. Patton describes her as staying awake at all hours of the night, would not put down her computer, would not put away the files.
At the same time, struggling with her writing and publication deadlines, and she began self-medicating. I actually see her as being his final victim.
I got an email from a friend of Michelle's, and he told me that Michelle had passed away that morning. I think I went completely numb.
I eventually learned that she had fallen asleep and didn't get up.
According to the medical examiner's report, Michelle died from a combination of fentanyl, Xanax, and I believe Adderall. And that's when the magnitude of her loss hit me.
I immediately thought, what can I do? I can help finish this book. When Michelle passed, we decided at the end of the book, what are the strings that she left us to get us out of this maze? It was genetic genealogy.
From the very beginning, I knew DNA was going to solve this case.
Thousands of pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and only one person knew what it was supposed to look like. That one person wasn't Michelle. It was the killer himself.
It has now been 40 years that one of the most prolific serial killers in American history has managed to elude police. The man known as the Golden State Killer has been linked to 50 rapes and 13 murders. Police are frustrated and running out of leads.
I have no path to go on this investigation. None of the tips coming in are anything that I'm excited about, so I'm floundering.
When Michelle passed and me and Paul were working on the book, we talk about what are the strings that she left us to get us out of this maze. And it was genetic genealogy.
Forensic genealogy was something that Michelle was excited about, and that seemed like the most viable, direct pathway to this offender's identity.
Hi, and welcome to 23andMe.
Companies like Ancestry.com and 23andMe had already been using genetic genealogy for years, allowing millions of customers to spit into a tube and use their DNA to discover family roots and long-lost relatives.
Ancestry.com searches the world's largest online family history research.
As a growing number, particularly of adoptees, are realizing these sites that are really created for learning about family history can help me start to figure out who I'm biologically related to. To help people to find their biological mothers, to find their biological fathers.
How are you?
To find siblings, to find cousins.
It wasn't too long for people to realize, wait a minute, what if we use the DNA of criminals to try and identify their second cousins or third cousins and try to narrow it down from there?
I start learning how this technology could be used. We become blown away at the power of it. And then we recognize this is the way we need to go. But then there was a concern as to whether we had enough DNA. I had consumed all the East Area Rapist DNA, doing all the testing I had done over the years.
And he found a pristine DNA sample going back to the 1980 murder of Lyman and Charlene Smith in Ventura County.
A second sexual assault kit in the coroner's office that had never been opened.
To my knowledge, there are no other medical examiners who make duplicate rape kits.
In March of 1980, Lyman and Charlene Smith were found bludgeoned to death in their bed.
It was a horrific scene that I will never forget. I'd arrive at the scene with my little suitcase, a tube rack, dry ice, and a microscope. I always made duplicate kits, and both kits were identical.
That turned out to be a gold mine for us because that second kit had sat in the coroner's possession for 38 years untouched. And so these swabs collected from Charlene Smith's body were pristine.
Police had been sitting on this genetic fingerprint for 4 decades, waiting for the science to catch up. Genetic genealogy had only been used to solve a criminal case once before by a woman named Barbara Ray Venter.
I've always liked puzzles. I used to love playing Clue when I was a kid. What I've discovered is that law enforcement are pretty big gossips. And so they were all sort of talking amongst each other. And apparently Paul was talking to the detective on the other case.
And I was like, how did you do that? I called Barbara up and I explained, I'm working a case. It's an old case. I don't tell her what case it is, but could this be done to identify this unknown offender?
So Paul Holes was able to take that DNA and convert it into a DNA profile, which is basically a number. And he used this no-frills genealogy website called GEDmatch.
And I just uploaded the Golden State Killer's profile and allowed the GEDmatch servers to do their magic and produce the list of people that potentially shared some DNA with my offender.
We were all logging in several times a day to see if the matches are there.
Then all of a sudden, he started connecting to some distant relatives. We're talking third, fourth, fifth cousins.
So we immediately knew that we were going to be building a lot of family trees to sort out who he was.
We're now trying to identify common ancestors from this list of people who share DNA with the person we're looking for. And we end up spending 4 months building family trees.
And unlike if you were to upload your DNA to a website and try to build out a family tree from yourself being the beginning point, this is reverse engineering a family tree. So you start with a wide swath of potential relatives, and by a painstaking process of elimination, you start cutting down that pool. Narrow it down, narrow it down, narrow it down.
Genealogy testing had indicated that our offender was of European descent.
40% Southern European, and a number of the matches that we had were with people who had Italian surnames.
Once it came down to that final pool, that's when the real detective work began. You had to hit public records. Things like marriage certificates, birth certificates, grave site markings.
So now we only had 6 men on the list. So now they had to be a certain age, they had to be in Northern California, and they had to be related only through the maternal line to our crime scene DNA. And at that point, we then had one other piece of information that we hadn't applied yet, and that was eye color.
She looks at a separate tool on a related site that suggests that their suspect had blue eyes and was bald.
The FBI then pulled the California DMV records for those 6 men. Only one had blue eyes.
Joseph DeAngelo.
Joseph DeAngelo.
Joseph DeAngelo. After 4 decades and countless hours of detective work, it's an emerging technology, genetic genealogy, that finally gives investigators their strongest lead yet, a name.
Who is this guy? I need to start drilling down on him, and I'm now within a couple of weeks of retiring. So I'm trying to find out as much as possible, as fast as possible, about Joe DeAngelo.
He's not in any of the criminal databases, so police start putting together a case to either eliminate him or prove he is in fact the man they're looking for.
Physically, he was within the specs of what we were expecting for the Golden State Killer. Born in 1945, a little bit on the older side, but most certainly within that 1940 to 1960 range.
Investigators started zeroing in on Joseph DeAngelo, and they started digging up things about his past.
He goes into the Navy. We know he is stationed in San Diego. We know that he spent some time overseas.
Joe DeAngelo returned to Sacramento, began working with the Auburn Police Department.
He had a nickname on the department. It was Junk Food Joey. He would always have a Coke in his hand, a bag of chips, a candy bar. He really violated people's space all the time. Get kind of close to your face and always be touching you.
He had been fired from Auburn Police back in 1979.
He had been observed shoplifting a can of dog repellent and a hammer from a Citrus Heights drugstore. He was accosted by the clerk. He was subsequently arrested.
Auburn Police Chief Nick Willick had to fire DeAngelo at the time.
And the chief said when Joe was put on administrative leave, he had threatened to kill me.
I immediately remembered back my daughter, you know, being afraid. A short time after he had been fired, she said, there was someone looking in my bedroom window with a flashlight.
She said he got up and ran outside. That man was gone, but there were shoe impressions all around the perimeter of his house.
But there's another huge piece of the puzzle they had been investigating in relation to possible suspects, and that piece also seemingly falls into place in D'Angelo's story, Bonnie.
There's a newspaper clip from an Auburn journal about the engagement, and there's this picture of a young brunette. She's 18 years old.
Announcing his engagement in 1970 to a woman named Bonnie Colwell.
Remember, Bonnie was one of D'Angelo's early girlfriends who broke off their engagement. So suddenly, Detective Holmes and others were like, wait a minute, could this be Bonnie that we remember following early on in the case?
And of course, Bonnie was significant due to the victim in attack number 36.
While the East Area Rapist is literally raping that victim, he is crying and he's saying, I hate you, Bonnie, over and over. I'm now within days of retiring. It's like, okay, I've got to go boots on the ground on this D'Angelo.
More and more things connect and click. You know, right place, right time. Let's go see if this is the guy.
I'm now my second to last day at work, and I go, I have to go see this guy, where he's living. And I park on the curb directly opposite from D'Angelo's house. There's a car in the driveway. I'm pretty sure he's home. And I'm sitting there, and I'm wondering, what's the likelihood, really, that this is the Golden State Killer?
A day before his retirement, Paul Holes literally has the suspect in his crosshairs. It's been a 24-year hunt, but he uses restraint and turns in his badge the next day.
It was a tough decision to drive away from that house that day. I was upset. I was like, you know, I didn't solve this case before I retired.
The Sacramento Sheriff's Office picks up where Paul Holes left off.
And so what they have to do next is conduct surveillance on Joseph D'Angelo. And what they're waiting for is an opportunity to collect his DNA.
And they secretly follow him to a shopping plaza.
But Joseph was not smoking, he was not spitting out gum. So what they had to work with was he had a car, they swabbed the door handle. And that gave them something that's called touch DNA.
They were able to pick up an initial DNA sample and some fingerprints from his car door.
I'm sitting in a Chinese restaurant in Colorado Springs, and my cell phone rings, and it's Lieutenant Kirk Campbell from Sacramento DA's office. You can absolutely not tell anybody about this. And at that moment I go, okay. And he says, the lab is excited about this.
It's mixed with DNA from other people, but it looks like it might be a close match.
But the Sacramento DA was saying, we want a cleaner sample.
So they stake out his house, wait for him to put out the trash.
He puts his trash out on the curb. They get a guy that comes and collects the trash.
They sneak over and pull tissue out of the trash bin and take that back to the lab.
And one of the items out of the trash had a single source male DNA profile that matched 100% the Golden State Killer's DNA profile.
Get this call from my chief deputy. I think his first words are you sitting down? And I asked him a million times, and I'm like, you better not be messing with me. He goes, they're shaking, Anne-Marie. They're shaking at the crime lab.
They got a match, but now they have to get the suspect into custody. So they call Paul Holes back to assist with the operation.
There was concerns about how he would respond if this did not go smoothly.
I can imagine they were prepared for every scenario. This is somebody who has been a sophisticated, a diverse, sadistic killer.
A law enforcement team now gathers outside D'Angelo's home for the takedown. He and his wife have been separated for decades, and he's living with his daughter and granddaughter.
The hope is to get him away from his house in order to be able to do it safely. So at a certain point, D'Angelo's over off to the side of his house. It looks like a prime spot. And then we just hear over the radio, go.
You can run on for a long time, run on for a long time.
He's been called the East Side Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker, the original Night Stalker.
Run on for a long time.
And the Golden State Killer. Today, it's our pleasure to call him defendant.
Sooner or later, God will cut you down.
That bombshell arrest, that former police officer.
72-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo.
He's been described as one of the most prolific serial killers that terrorized California for decades.
Sooner or later, God will cut you down.
The arrest of Joseph DeAngelo dropped like a bomb. All these years, hiding in plain sight.
Oh my God, he's living in Sacramento? He's been living there under everybody's noses for all this time? It was stunning.
It's a moment when you realize that 40 years of work by a lot of folks to bring some answers to some family members was becoming real.
It's just unbelievable. After all these years, they got him.
I feel I reverted right back. That part that I was so successful at tucking away in my brain, that door opened. I was shaking.
It was hard to process. I know after I got the call, the tears welled up. Thousands of nightmares and thousands of sleepless nights have come to a rest.
It was just something that was on my mind for all those years. Want him caught before I die.
We could finally put a face and a name to this masked individual that was terrorizing all these communities back in the 70s and 80s.
Joseph DeAngelo's first arraignment in court.
Please make sure your cell phones are silent.
Was a complete madhouse. It was a zoo. In the front rows were family members of victims and victims themselves.
We were all super, super nervous.
I start sobbing and sobbing, and I couldn't stop.
Joseph James DeAngelo.
And then that moment, Joseph DeAngelo, in a red-orange jumpsuit that says prisoner on the back, rolls in a wheelchair, hunched over, his hands handcuffed.
This is the Golden State Killer? This old man? And he looks so harmless. And I think that is exactly the impression that he wants to create.
Is Joseph James DeAngelo your true and correct legal name? I'm sorry? Yes. You have.
At that moment, you could hear gasps. There was something about his voice that clearly brought back years of pain and fear.
I thought, this has got to be a big act.
In the week prior, he's riding a motorcycle at high speeds. He was walking around just fine.
And within a day of his arrest, he's all of a sudden bound to a wheelchair.
But then the jail surveillance camera tells a very different story.
He's climbing up on the bunks and getting up on the vents and cleaning things.
Doing exercises in the jail cell.
He's a master of disguise. He used that during all of his crimes, and he is continuing to use it, but now in a different way.
Victims are still processing it. And the big question, why? Why did he do all of this?
What really did transpire? Why he became this person, this predator?
I think that's the million-dollar question.
Mr. DeAngelo would like to make a brief statement.
I'd like to get into his mind to talk to him and find out what brought him up to where he was.
There is no recipe for a serial killer. We can see all of these markers or all of these risk factors along the way. We have a physically abusive dad.
And a relative reveals a bombshell in that HBO docuseries All Be Gone in the Dark, detailing how Joseph DeAngelo, at the age of 9 or 10, allegedly witnessed his younger sister being sexually assaulted.
She was 7 years old. The very thing that happened to my mother is the very thing that my uncle went and did to other women. How sickening is that?
It would be so easy for us as forensic psychologists if we could kind of go, a person is abused, and therefore they become this kind of offender.
The vast majority of people don't turn into serial rapists and serial killers. So it's hard to feel the sympathy for these offenders or to say that this event made him do it.
Bonnie certainly is not responsible for D'Angelo's actions, and the breakup did not cause those actions.
Sentencing today for the so-called Golden State Killer.
Former police officer Joseph D'Angelo Jr.
committed rapes and murders all across California.
This is the matter of the people's state of California versus Joseph James D'Angelo.
This will be the first time that these people have seen him since the nights that they were victimized.
This is a network of people that have come together that never knew each other, but share one thing in common.
On March 18th, 1978, Joe D'Angelo attacked us while we were sleeping. He kidnapped me from my bed. He raped me repeatedly.
I want you to look at me. You bound my wrist and ankles. You blindfolded me. Remember that?
At 3 different times that night, I thought I was going to die.
No 13-year-old should have to find out what a rape kit is. My family couldn't hide the agony in their faces.
What matters is that you will spend the rest of your life in prison, and I survived.
I just want to tell you, buddy, to rot in hell.
You will forever be known as a repulsive coward who hid behind a mask of evil. The devil can keep you company in your prison cell as he gnaws away at whatever soul you have left.
Mr. D'Angelo would like to make a brief statement.
I've listened to all your statements, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt.
Mr. D'Angelo is sentenced to a total of 11 life without the possibility of parole sentences, plus an additional life sentence, plus an additional 8 years. The survivors have spoken clearly. The defendant deserves no mercy.
In the end, we may have lost a battle one night, but we've won the war of life. We're nearing the end of a very long journey here.
It shows that justice doesn't have a time limit. You can still find answers decades and decades later if you're willing to do the work. Inside Michelle's computer, she had a letter, and it was her writing directly to the Golden State Killer.
One day soon, you'll hear footsteps coming up your front walk. This is how it ends for you. You'll be silent forever, and I'll be gone in the dark. You threatened a victim once. Open the door. Show us your face. Walk into the light.
Tonight, a wave of terror and murder in one American town.
And nearly all the killings have one very unexpected thing in common: a supposed good friend. 2020 starts right now.
The first body came out after midnight, but it was only the first.
When the murder started, for the most part, they were just another murder.
Shauna Hawk, Jean Balcom, Deborah Slaughter.
Each one seen individually.
Here's another homicide.
2 murders in 2 days.
Who is African American. Caroline Love, Michelle Stinson.
Another victim to roll out.
A lot of women are in fear.
I just talked to her, and now she's dead.
The patterns of women being killed didn't really add up.
Randy Henderson and 9 others.
These 10 murders.
The murder count possibly totaling 13.
Why didn't police see it sooner?
All victims of an unknown suspect.
Whoever did this was a ghost.
Danger disguised as a friend, and his victims never saw him coming.
One, why did it take so long to see a pattern? We feel bad that we did not know that sooner.
But it wasn't just police. It was those of us in the media, and I think the community.
Man, it was right there. This young mother was killed in the same manner. All had been strangled.
He looked at me and he said, "We think we have a serial killer."
You know, if you don't get him off the streets fast, he could do it again.
I was not going to stop until I found out who did this.
If we'd only had the little pieces, had we only known what we know now.
She was one of his victims too.
So this was Shauna's first prom. Oh man. I remember the day she found the dress. Purple was her favorite color.
𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒 was a very beautiful young woman. She went to Central Piedmont Community College.
All I can tell you about Shauna is that incredible human being.
Raised by her mother, single mom at the time. She was industrious, ambitious, worked. She wanted to make something out of herself.
She was the apple of her mother's eye.
Shauna was born on December 2nd, and I was all of 18 years old. I remember when Shauna was crying, and the minute they laid her on my chest, our eyes locked, and she just calmed right down.
She was younger than me, but, you know, bossy. That's the right word for Shauna. She was bossy. Every time.
She's worried about the long hours and whether she's going to be able to keep up with her schoolwork. She actually talks with the Taco Bell manager, a guy named Henry Wallace.
I went and met him once, and he said, nice to meet you, Miss Sumter. I've hired your daughter, and I think she's going to be great on our team.
That year, February 19th, was on a Friday.
Dee Sumter refers to that day as Horrible Friday. But it started out as just any other day at their home on Elon Street.
She said, well, I'm gone. I love you. And I said, I love you more. And then she stuck her head back in the door and she said, Mom, I love you. And I said, baby, I love you more. And then she took off.
That afternoon, Dee gets a call at work.
Her godson's mother called and said, Miss Dee, have you heard from Shauna? And I said, no. She said, Miss Dee, I'm not trying to say anything, but something's wrong. I don't know what, but something's not right.
She noticed some unusual things around the house when she came home. Her daughter's car was not there. That wasn't unusual, but what was unusual is it was a cold day in February, and Shauna's purse was in the house and her winter coat was in the house.
She's wondering, well, what's going on? Where is she?
I called her boyfriend and I said, Daryl, get over to my house, please, now. And he's just shaking his head. He said, this is baffling. I said, more than baffling. Something is definitely wrong.
And they decided to call the police and report her as missing. As they were waiting for the police to respond, Daryl decided to go looking through the house and just check.
I hear his footsteps. He walks into the bathroom.
He pulled back the shower curtain and found Shauna in the bathtub and a small amount of water, fully clothed, and she was dead.
The next sound I heard was him blood-curdling scream. He runs back down the hall. Miss Dee, dial 911. She's in the bathtub. Last thing I remember is seeing them push her out on a gurney doing CPR.
It was obviously too late at that point.
Subsequently, we find out that she was raped and then strangled inside of her bathtub.
And that was kind of unusual for us at the time. We did not have a lot of strangulations during that time with the homicide investigations.
Strangulation is rare. It's more commonly seen in domestic cases or cases where people have a relationship.
Murder? I couldn't hardly even spell the word murder before Shauna was murdered.
We didn't have any damage to the doors. We didn't have any damage to the windows. So we believe that she allowed the assailant to come inside the residence.
The killer was also meticulous in terms of going through the house, making sure he wiped down anything that he may have touched. So they had no DNA, they had no fingerprints. In effect, whoever did this was a ghost.
Who would want to kill this beautiful, innocent, sweet, kind, loving person? My best friend, my daughter.
We didn't find anything significant that would draw us to point to any particular suspect at the time.
She couldn't have had an enemy. She wasn't that kind of person.
So after she was found murdered at her home, the police tried to locate her car. It was not discovered for weeks, and when it was discovered, it was found in a parking lot at Central Piedmont Community College.
The front seat was pushed back, and Shauna was short. So I think the only thing they took away from that is that it had to be somebody that was taller than Shauna.
In the course of their investigation, police actually are missing something rather important. 8 months earlier, a young woman by the name of Caroline Love disappeared. And it turns out that Caroline and Shauna were friends.
Something ain't right. They need to go back and look at what happened to Caroline, because Caroline's missing and now here Shauna is dead.
What's coming is a incredibly rude awakening.
There's some decomposition on the body.
For the Charlotte Police Department.
What soon followed was a wave of death and grief unlike anything this town has ever seen.
The best way to describe Charlotte in the early 90s would be is that it was growing extremely fast.
Charlotte was at the beginning of its banking boom.
Johnson from 20.
After the Charlotte Hornets got here, I think that's when everyone started using the term world-class city. The skyline seemed like it changed every 3 to 4 months.
Charlotte was booming. A lot of steel and glass and a lot of looking upward. Maybe not enough looking down.
Police are pointing out the drug dealers.
And what was happening on the ground.
Drugs are a problem in every large city in America.
In the neighborhoods and in communities.
Police say that this is what they call a crack house.
We were headed towards one of our highest murder rates in the city's history.
On the legitimate side, banking was the growth industry. On the criminal side, drugs was the growth industry.
Gun was found behind the dresser along with the crack bag.
It was a very, very violent period of time.
Drugs and their debris were...
In fact, I would say it was the most violent period in Charlotte's history.
Members of the violent Mustang gang were arrested.
In the 90s, we were not equipped to handle the murder rate. We had maybe 8 homicide detectives, but only 6 were actively working.
It was almost like they were having to work homicides like car accidents.
It's the 90s in Charlotte, North Carolina. Skyscrapers are going up, but at the same time, a series of crimes are unfolding. 20-year-old Shauna Hawk is found strangled in her bathtub, and her friend and co-worker, Caroline Love, has vanished.
Caroline Love went missing in June of 1992.
Caroline lived in East Charlotte. I lived in West Charlotte, and we all worked together at Bojangles.
The Love sisters, Kathy and Caroline, worked at Bojangles with Henry Wallace, who was Shauna Hawk's boss at Taco Bell.
She was a really fun person. She always had like a really cute boyfriend.
She didn't show up for work.
This don't sound like her, you know? Something's definitely wrong.
I know my mom, I remember her calling like everybody. She called everybody in our family, like, have you seen her? Is she over here?
It was like she just disappeared off the face of the earth.
She was living with this young lady by the name of Sadie McKnight. Sadie McKnight and her boyfriend, Henry Wallace, helped file the report for the missing person of Caroline Love.
Kathy, Henry, and Sadie are the ones who went to the police station to file the police report.
Shauna had the news on and she said, Mommy, Caroline is missing. Something is wrong. It's not like her just not to come to work and not call me or call work or say something.
When Shauna Hawk is murdered, police don't immediately tie that to the disappearance of Caroline Love, but there is a connection.
Before Taco Bell, Shauna had worked at Bojangles with Caroline.
She and Shauna were close friends. They were in high school together. They worked together. They were buddies. They hung out together.
My mom was on it. She was like, there's no way that within a year that Caroline's missing, and then now one of her good friends is dead.
They always remained hopeful that she would be found alive and okay.
I thought so many times that she was gonna come back. So I remember even when searching for her, I had these 2 little dresses, and I wore them because I wanted to look nice, you know. I wanted to look nice in case she showed up.
4 months after 𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒 was murdered, another young lady, 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 Spain, turns up murdered as well.
I think this is one of my favorites. Audrey was a free spirit. She lived life on her terms. Spirited, adventurous, positive, a hard worker.
𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 Spain was another young, attractive black female who also worked at Taco Bell.
I do remember receiving a call from Audrey's manager telling me that she had missed going to work that particular day and that he was concerned.
So they actually sent the manager or the maintenance people to her apartment complex, and when they entered the apartment complex, or entered her apartment, they found her deceased on the bed.
I don't know how much information they actually gave us at that time. I just remembered that she had been murdered, she had been strangled, there was a rape also. It was devastating. It's just not something that you ever expect to have to deal with. Audrey was my younger sister, and we grew up together, so it was very difficult. What did I miss? How did this happen? And you're totally blindsided. Yeah, totally.
The interesting thing about that crime scene was that the thermostat it was the summer months, had been turned way down.
The crime scene techs, when they got there, were shivering.
That's because the air conditioning had been cranked to slow down the decomposition process.
Apparently, her body had been there for at least 2 days.
In the first 6 months of 1993, 𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒 and 𝐅𝐔𝐋𝐋 Spain have been strangled to death.
Before 𝐄𝐏 was murdered, a friend of hers, Caroline Love, had vanished. Even so, the detectives have no clue that these cases are connected.
I just don't feel like they knew. Maybe she was random, maybe not.
These cases never came together because there were other detectives working it and not just one. And so we had very little information to go on at the time to try to link it with any of the other homicides.
We just knew that we had another young black woman who is found murdered.
We have a possible serial killer working in the shadows. But do we know that? We have no idea.
In the months ahead, more Charlotte women will fall victim to strangulation and murder. But the killer will make a mistake, giving police a glimpse as to who he is. '93 is the year of living dangerously in Charlotte.
Caroline Love, 𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒, 𝐅𝐔𝐋 Spain.
Peak murder rates, and somebody is killing young black women.
It was earlier this afternoon when a family friend found the body of the woman.
It was September of '93. We were called out to a home where a woman's body had been found.
When police got to this apartment off of Marvin Road, they found two very frightened children.
Michelle, yeah, I was there. Vividly remember Michelle Stinson. Here's a young woman who had been murdered inside of her own home with her children present.
Michelle Stinson was killed in front of her two children.
A friend drops by to visit Michelle.
He looked in the windows and saw one of her little boys playing and, was banging on the window.
Where's your mommy? Where is she? And they tell him, well, mommy's asleep on the floor.
And he was getting ready to leave when the little boy opened the door and he went in.
He finds her dead on the kitchen floor.
There were signs of strangulation, but her cause of death was 4 stab wounds.
As Michelle Stinson's bloodied body was taken away, those who knew her said goodbye with tears and tried to make sense of it all.
My goodness, what person, what monster could take the life of a mother in front of their children?
Police say that there is no sign of forced entry, and that indicates that perhaps Michelle knew her killer and invited him in. Despite that, they failed to find any viable leads or suspects.
Michelle Stinson's case, like 𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒 and Audrey Spain, and the still missing Caroline Love, goes unsolved.
You can't even stay at home and be safe anymore.
For some unknown reason, they just couldn't connect the dots.
Dee Sumter's a remarkable woman. Yes, her heart broke, but her will didn't.
Dee Sumter went on a public campaign to call attention to her daughter's death.
It's better knowing.
And she turned what was the worst possible situation into something extremely positive for this community when she, along with Shauna's godmother, Judy Williams, started an organization called Mothers of Murdered Offspring, which is still here.
I just knew I had a daughter who was murdered, and it wasn't being investigated properly. I was appalled by that, angered by it, and I was not going to stop until I found out who did this.
They felt that the police department or the city didn't care enough because they were young black women.
Dee Sumter, whose daughter Shauna was on that list of victims, still wonders what if some of the faces were white instead.
Every time another youngster was murdered, there was Dee calling the press, going after the police, saying, "What are you going to do to help us?"
She was turning up the heat on the police.
They particularly attacked the police each and every day about what we were doing and what we were not doing, because they thought that we should be doing more, and we were telling them that we couldn't do any more than what we had. We were overworked and we were understaffed, but we were doing the best that we could.
Dear killer, I am the mother of Shauna Denise Hawk.
She wrote a letter to the editor calling out the person who took her daughter's life.
Something in me said he's got to have some type of a heart. Might be a dark heart, but it's a heart. Please, please, please come forward and turn yourself into the authorities so justice can be served and so you can get the help you need and so forgiveness can be given. For without this, you are eternally doomed. Can I have a moment, please?
Dee Sumter's letter appears in the Charlotte Observer. And in the same day's paper, a brief article, a woman in Charlotte found dead in her apartment. Here we go again, another victim.
In the mornings when Vanessa Mack had to go to work, her babysitter would come here to her house to pick up her 4-month-old daughter.
A young lady by the name of Vanessa Little Mack was murdered in her home.
I said, Vanessa, I said, get up, you know, like that. And then she didn't move and she didn't say anything. So I turned the bedroom light on. And I said, oh God.
Vanessa Mack was killed in February of 1994, almost to the day that 𝐄𝐏𝐻𝐒 had been killed a year earlier.
Blood was on her face and a towel was around her neck.
Her baby daughter, just yards away, was okay. Police believe the infant was in the home when her mother was killed.
Vanessa Mack was a hospital worker.
Just an honest, hardworking young lady doing the best that she can to provide for her family.
I don't know why they would have did it, because she was a good girl. She didn't bother nobody.
Vanessa Little Mac's cause of death was once again ligature strangulation.
There is a link to previous killings, but police don't seem to notice it at the time.
Vanessa Mack had a sister who worked at Taco Bell. So again, the correlation of another person working with somebody at a Taco Bell.
We started looking for financial card records and discovered that a bank card was missing from the scene.
They got her banking history and found that her teller card had been used unsuccessfully.
In her final moments, Vanessa Mack tricks her killer, giving him the wrong PIN to her ATM card.
She had made it up. It wasn't the correct password, so that's why he couldn't get into her account. She still fought back. She didn't give him everything he wanted.
There are security cameras on the ATM.
So we looked at the security camera footage, and we could possibly say that it was a male of dark skin complexion.
But it wasn't a great picture. There wasn't a lot to go on.
The only thing you could see in the photograph was his ear.
And we did see a earring in the figure of a cross at that time.
A hoop cross earring. Only thing the photograph showed.
But that killer wearing a gold cross earring is about to make another mistake, revealing his identity.
Like a beast, sitting, waiting for a prey, just waiting to go and hurt someone.
It's March 1994 in the city of Charlotte, and someone has gotten away with murdering 4 women in a year's time.
My goddaughter was one of the victims. Shauna Hawk. She was one of his victims too.
Shauna Hawk found strangled in her home last February. And then 2 weeks ago, Vanessa Little Mack also strangled.
All black women in their 20s, all strangled to death in their own home.
Something's not right here, you know? Something is not right.
I mean, that's one question I want to have for the police department. Why hadn't they shown a real interest? And I really felt that we've been neglected.
All being investigated as seemingly unconnected. That is about to change in one single deadly day at the same apartment complex.
The Lake Apartments, and I would refer to them as the infamous Lake Apartments, because if there is any location in this town that's affiliated with these cases, that's the location.
The next victim is on March 9th of 94. 18-year-old Brandy Henderson, a young mom.
She was funny. She loved to joke around. She sang off key, but she thought that she could sing, and we just let her do it.
Brandy lives with her boyfriend, Lamar Woods, and their 10-month-old son, Tyrese.
Brandy told me that when she had Tyrese, that she felt like her life was complete. She felt like she had made a masterpiece.
One night in March, Brandy calls her cousin George, asking him to come over and hang out.
She was like, well, I've got some Chinese food that I ordered and from takeout. Why don't you just come over? Come on over. You know, come see me. And I said, well, it's already 8 o'clock. I'm tired. I've been working all day. I got to get up early tomorrow. And she said, oh, come on.
They're talking on the phone. Then there's a knock on the door.
The phone call was interrupted, and she said someone was at the door.
And I heard her in the background saying, just make sure you lock the door behind you. I didn't worry about who was there because she said lock the door behind you, so she trusted him.
Late that night, Brandy's boyfriend comes home from work.
The first thing he notices that sort of catches his eye is that kind of like the lights are off, which is a little bit unusual because he knows Brandy is home.
He turns on the light. The apartment's been trashed.
His stereo is missing. The place has been robbed.
So he starts checking around, and he finds his kid and notices the kid is not really breathing normally. So then he's like, what's going on here?
Someone has tied a pair of shorts around 10-month-old Tyrese's neck. This child is struggling to breathe.
He runs to help him. He unties the things around his neck and then finds Brandy.
Brandy was in the bedroom, lying on the bed, with a ligature around her neck.
You're watching as this woman's body is being carried downstairs, knowing her child has been injured, possibly gravely, and luckily he survived.
The next morning, as soon as I turned the news on,
we don't have a significant break anywhere in the case. We're still hoping that somebody may come forward with some information.
They had a stretcher rolling across the sidewalk in front of her apartment. And I knew at that time that it was real, and I just lost it because I just could not comprehend that I just talked to her and now she's dead.
The killer stole not only the stereo, but a Pringles can of coins that Brandy had been saving up.
However, this suspect got in there. Apparently he was let in or had access to get in on his own.
Contact 60130 on tag 2.
Right at this moment, detectives get an urgent radio call. They're needed back at the Lake Apartments.
Another woman is found strangled.
I could not believe that the next day we're back at the same apartment complex where another woman is found dead in her apartment. And this woman is Betty Jean Baucom. She's 24 years old. She has a 3-year-old daughter.
Betty Baucom, who lived somewhere in those same apartments, worked at Bojangles.
Betty never did anything wrong to anybody. Sean was trying to help people, and I mean, it just really hit us hard here.
The stuff hit the fan. It was crazy town, man. Everybody was over there. It seemed like there was 10,000 police cops over there.
I was interviewing people who were racing into the apartment complex.
We came here to make sure that my girlfriend was safe because her husband is at work and her and her daughter is home alone.
Did this concern you when you heard this?
Yes, it did. I mean, it's unbelievable.
The fear that it stoked was just insane.
I grew up in New York, and I thought this was going to be like, you know, a safe haven out here. And apparently there is no safe haven anymore.
So now we have a major problem. Now we have 2 young ladies in the same apartment complex have been found murdered, and there's a lot of conversation.
I was in court and saw one of the homicide detectives, and I asked him, you know, what's going on? And that was the first I heard. He looked at me and he said, "We think we have a serial killer."
Police worry this could be a serial strangler.
Betty Jean Baucom's car has been stolen.
We're looking for a vehicle now of the latest victim, and we believe the suspect is probably fled it.
So during this time, you know, we have an APB out for Betty Baucom's car, and we're looking citywide for the car.
Police found the car in this parking lot. Actually, it's right across the street from the apartment complex where the women were found murdered.
On the floor of Betty's car is a Pringles can stolen from Brandy Henderson.
So that connects the 2 murders at the Lake Apartments. Whoever killed Betty and stole her car must have also killed Brandy and stolen her coins.
Tonight, police aren't taking any chances at all. They're setting up perimeters all around the Lake Apartments.
Investigators say they need more information quickly.
You know, if you don't get him off the streets fast, he could do it again.
Use caution, be careful, and think before you open the door.
The killer is out there somewhere, and they feel certain if given the chance, he could strike again.
Word tonight of a serial killer in Charlotte, North Carolina.
It's the shock of recognition that comes when a community realizes there's been a killer in its midst.
So now we have a major problem. Now we have 2 young ladies in the same apartment complex have been found murdered. The media has now been involved.
Be careful letting them into your house. If there's some doubt at all, you feel nervous with the person that may be coming to your door, don't hesitate, call 911.
Everybody's in uproar, everybody in a panic.
The city was on edge, you know, just fear all over the whole city.
It was scary. It was scary. I can remember calling some friends that I know on that side of town and say, hey, be careful.
Investigators say they need more information quickly. Young women were murdered in the same apartment complex, and their killer is still out there somewhere.
Minutes before Brandy Henderson was murdered at the Lake apartment, she had been on the phone with her cousin George Burrell.
She said, hold on, somebody's at the door. And I heard her in the background saying, just make sure you lock the door behind you.
The day after the murder, George says he stops over at a neighbor's apartment.
As I walked in, to my left sat Henry Wallace, watching the TV. I had seen Henry Wallace at Brandy and her boyfriend's house. I had met him one time.
By daylight, detectives were back at the Lake Apartments with another murder on their hands.
The news came on. So we started watching the news, and it was about Brandy's murder.
Investigators say whoever killed these women was cold-bloodedly calm, spending a lot of time in each of their apartments.
I felt this on my shoulder. I felt a pat, like, you know, I'm so sorry. And he was looking at the TV, watching Gurney go across the sidewalk with her body, and his eyes just glow. He was just glowing, like, just, you know, like amazed, like he was excited. And I could just see that in his eyes, like he was just fixed on the TV.
Brandy Henderson's 10-month-old baby was also attacked and left for dead.
And he's like, I'm so sorry, what happened to your cousin? And Henry said, she was always there with her baby by herself. When somebody come in, she would say, lock the door behind them. I had that flashback to when I was speaking to her, and she said, just make sure you lock the door behind you. And I knew at that moment that it was him. I said, oh my word, he killed her.
George says he immediately told a police officer about his suspicion, but he says the officer blew him off.
By then, they knew that they had a serial killer on their hands, and they needed to find him quickly, but they didn't find him quickly enough.
As they're processing all of this with Betty Jean and Brandy Henderson being murdered at the Lakes Apartments, one more person is found murdered about a mile away, and her name is Deborah Ann Slaughter.
She loved to laugh. She had a very contagious laugh. She also had a beautiful voice. She and I both grew up singing in church together. I remember Boys II Men came on the radio singing The End of the Road. I just remember us going, you know, to the end of the road, and I can't let go. That was the last time we sung together.
Deborah Slaughter lived in the Glen Hollow apartments, which were the same apartments that Audrey Spain lived in.
Henry Wallace had also lived at Glen Hollow at one time, and Deborah worked at the Bojangles, same place where Henry Wallace worked.
And my mother did give us warnings. Her exact words is, you know, there's this serial killer in Charlotte, and I need y'all to be careful. And I would say to Deborah all the time, you know, be careful. I always told her to be careful. Deborah was a tough person, and she just wasn't scared of anything.
It was this last Thursday the bodies of Brandy Henderson and Betty Jean Balcom were discovered. 2 days later, Deborah Slaughter was found just a mile away.
At some point after letting this man into her home, Deborah Slaughter comes to a horrifying realization.
Once his attack was on, Deborah Slaughter made the connection between the recent murders. At that point, she said, "You're him." So Deborah did fight because Deborah knew that she was going to die.
Deborah Slaughter's case was much more violent than any of the other victims, and you could tell that there was a big struggle inside the home. She fought for her life.
Lovey Slaughter sees it every time she closes her eyes, her daughter's body lying on the dining room floor of her apartment.
When she knocked on the door just kind of pushed open, and she walked in.
And when I opened the door and saw her laid on that floor,
next thing I know, I look up and I see 2 firefighters bringing my mother down the stairs, and she's crying, and the first thing she said is, "Deborah's gone." She said she's gone.
You've got, oh, this person was strangled here, this person was strangled here, this person was strangled here. Huh.
Tonight, police aren't taking any chances at all.
Looking back,
The killer is out there somewhere.
for myself, as a reporter, I keep thinking, why didn't we start putting 2 and 2 together?
Go ahead, stop.
Then you have the police who are trained to do these kind of things. Why didn't they do it?
Look closely. Police say this is the face of a serial killer.
Who is this man who has confessed to the murders?
Once I touched him, so it was out of my control. It was out of my hands. So I couldn't stop it. There was no way I could stop it.
We have a possible serial killer working in the shadows.
And somebody is killing young black women. All black women in their 20s, all strangled to death in their own home.
Is some kind of a bold demon here, one like never before.
He's hiding in plain sight, and he's doing it very cleverly. He fools everybody.
He portrayed himself as the big brother, as the good friend.
and I remember him telling me, "It's gonna be okay, she's gonna come back."
He hugged me. He knew he had killed her.
So he kind of walked into their life knowing that at some point he's going to take their lives.
I didn't want to, but something or somebody was taking over my body.
He writes a name, then a second name, then a third name, but he keeps going.
He was talking about killing women like you're in some sort of boring book club.
The general tone in Charlotte was, why didn't you guys figure this out earlier?
Saying that they didn't prioritize these murders because the victims were black women.
You guys blew it. How could you miss this?
It was this last Thursday the bodies of Brandy Henderson and Betty Jean Balcom were discovered. 2 days later, Deborah Slaughter was found just a mile away.
Investigators have now contacted the FBI, trying to set up a profile of the killer.
Use caution, be careful, and think before you open the door. We don't have a significant break anywhere in the case. We're still hoping that somebody may come forward with some information.
Charlotte police are desperate to find this killer. They do get something to work with from Brandy Henderson's boyfriend, Lamar.
We asked him who would Brandy allow into the home without any problem. And he said Henry Wallace.
Once the detective on Brandy Henderson's case got the names of who she would have let into the apartment, he went to see if any of them had any criminal history. Henry Wallace did. He had a misdemeanor larceny charge, and there was a mugshot of Henry Wallace.
That's when Detective James Stansberry, who's been investigating the Vanessa Mack case, walks into the room.
He comes in and he sees the photograph of Henry Wallace. In that mugshot, Henry Wallace is wearing a hoop double-cross earring in his ear.
I looked at the photograph and something hit me.
The detective remembers that from the ATM on Vanessa Mack's case.
I saw the earring with the cross.
And that's similar to the same earring that we saw on the picture of Henry Wallace's arrest photo.
I see this and say, we may have something here.
Investigators hope this car stolen from Balcom spawns new leads.
Betty Jean's car is found across the street from the crime scene, Nissan Pulsar, and that was the biggest break that they've had to date, which was inevitably what led them to their suspect.
They hit a jackpot near the trunk area of that car where they found a palm print. That palm print matched someone who was already in the system.
That palm print came back to Henry Louis Wallace.
So now we're going to look for the person, Henry Louis Wallace.
March 12, 1994, around 2 in the afternoon, Deborah Slaughter's body is found. 3 hours later, police locate Henry Wallace and place him under arrest.
And when the cops came in, he had bathroom door shut. And my bathroom door shut. Hiding in there? Hiding in there.
Initially, he is not giving up the goods.
The police sent in literally teams of detectives trying to get him to talk. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. They sent in 2 more. I don't know what you're talking about. Enter Detective Tony Rice.
Tony Rice goes into the room and started to talk to Henry.
And he said, Henry, you mind if we just say a little prayer together? And he actually held Henry's hand and said a prayer.
After the prayer, then Tony said, well, now, can you tell me about what happened?
Henry said, give me a piece of paper. And he started writing down all the names of the women.
He writes a name, then a second name, then a third name, and these are victims that police had already suspected him of murdering. But Henry Wallace keeps going. Another name, another name, another name. A total of 10 victims. Charlotte police are stunned.
That was the first the police knew of the depth of how many people he had killed.
Henry, if you would, go ahead and just talk up for me and state your full name.
Henry Louis Wallace.
The police decided to record his confessions.
Shauna Hawk, I really didn't have any intentions of doing what I did to Shauna. I stopped by to see Shauna one day, and she gave me a hug. And when she gave me a hug, I had her real close, and I said, I want you to have sex with me. She said, you're joking, right? I said, no, I'm not. It's not a joke.
He gave a full confession. That's very unusual. Many of them deny it to their dying day, so to speak. But Henry Wallace didn't.
I told her to get dressed. I took her to the bathroom. That's where I maneuvered the chokehold on her. And so she passed out, and I filled the bathtub with water and placed her in it.
Coldest thing I ever heard in my life. He was talking about killing women like you're in some sort of boring book club.
Henry Wallace admits he raped each of his victims before killing them, and usually robbed them.
But what's really unusual is that Henry Wallace knew his victims, and they knew him.
That's what's different. He knew them, and he had to know them. He couldn't kill a stranger, he said.
I would always hear the voices of the people that I killed. I would always see them. I would always see a shadow of them. I would always hear their voices. I would always hear the, laughter from them.
Shauna Hawk's mother, Dee Sumter, says that Henry Wallace actually showed up at Shauna's wake.
I'm thinking, this is some kind of a bold demon here, one like never before. Had the literal gall to show up at a service for someone that he knew, he personally killed.
The thing that makes my blood run cold and just send shock shivers up and down my spine is the fact that I saw him after Shauna was murdered, and he expressed his condolences, and he hugged me, told me how sorry he was.
And he knew he had killed her.
I wanted to tell her so bad, D, I killed your daughter. But I was so scared. I was so scared. And I couldn't do it.
I mean, to be hugged by your child's murderer, showing up and sending his sympathies, that is some cold, calculated stuff going on right there.
We begin to get a bit of a portrait of Henry Wallace emerging from the photos shown in court.
He had many strengths in growing up. People liked him, and he was social.
Henry was a great person, very nice guy, got along well with everyone.
Yearbook photos and schoolmates who spent time with him.
But he also had some obviously very lethal problems.
He would have had every opportunity in the world with any of us. He could have easily gotten any of us, but he didn't.
Was there satisfaction in that for you? I didn't want to, but something or somebody was taking over my body, and I couldn't stop, even when I tried to stop.
Police say this is the face of a serial killer, a man who choked the life out of neighbors and co-workers. His name is Henry Louis Wallace.
Henry Wallace was born and raised in Barnwell, South Carolina, a small town about 3 hours south of Charlotte.
Before he became a serial killer, Henry Wallace was a fast food manager who had served in the Navy, had been married, and then divorced.
The news of his arrest shocked his hometown.
I still have a hard time believing now that it was our Henry.
Former classmates and the high school yearbook seemed to portray a completely different image than that of a cold-blooded killer.
Henry was a great person, very nice guy.
He was a good guy. He was fun. He had the biggest smile, the biggest personality, always happy. You know, he was the first male cheerleader we ever had. I would have never guessed in a million years that Henry had any kind of issues where he would do what he's done. Never in a million years.
He would be the person who's responsible for more deaths in Mecklenburg, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, than any other person that we've came in contact with.
I think the community was truly stunned. Those kinds of cases didn't happen here. Charlotte wasn't the kind of place where we would have a serial killer.
After Henry confessed to all of the murders that we believe he did in North Carolina, we began to formulate how are we going to tell the public.
Information indicates that this person was responsible for the murder of 10 women in Charlotte.
When we made the announcement, the city ate us alive, the media ate us alive.
I do remember the police coming out and saying, we have a serial killer, but you know what? Our officers did a great job.
The investigators worked tremendously hard and did an excellent job on the investigation of all of these 10 cases. We're sorry that we did not get him identified earlier. Had we done that, then we maybe could have saved the lives of some of these women.
The general tone in Charlotte was, why didn't you guys figure this out earlier?
The community became outraged.
The police was well aware of this a long time ago.
There were some in the community who criticized the Charlotte police, saying that they didn't prioritize these murders because the victims were black women.
I sat and just cried in my heart and outside because I wanted that same energy and effort to be extended to my child.
There was not a level of caring. This is where the racial disparity comes in.
We covered Dee, we covered her press conferences. One of the things that she made everyone think about and talk about was if these had been white women who were dying in South Charlotte, each killing would have been a huge story.
Race is always a factor in criminal investigations. Until America sees that it is not a factor, or we have to mention it during an interview, race is always going to be a factor.
All these cases were professionally and competently handled. There was nothing given short shrift.
One of the other stunning aspects of this case was how well Henry Wallace knew most of his victims.
And it seems that fast food restaurants are the common thread that bind Wallace to most of his alleged victims.
Everything was right here all along. It's been right here. And they've done everything except look right here.
Obvious connections. There's that word again, connecting the dots. In my humble opinion, blatantly ignored.
It was like, you guys blew it. How could you miss this?
It's not that we missed this, it's just that we were overwhelmed with the cases.
During that 2-year period that he was killing people, there were approximately 300 people murdered.
All of those cases were on desks of 6 homicide detectives in the 90s. We didn't have the technology. We definitely didn't have the manpower, and we definitely didn't have the resources.
When Henry Wallace confessed to police, he listed names of people that investigators didn't even know had been murdered.
Well, there is one name in particular on that list that I am certain wasn't on their radar at all, and that is Valencia Jumper.
Investigators say Valencia Jumper died in her 3rd-floor apartment. They say this also appears to be the unit where the fire started.
Valencia Jumper came to Charlotte. She was a student at Johnson C. Smith University.
Henry Wallace knew Valencia's sister. That was their connection.
She was found in a house that had caught fire. That didn't fit any patterns before or after.
It was ruled that maybe she was out drinking with her friends and had too much to drink, put a pot of beans on the stove to eat, and the fire engulfed the apartment.
Investigators say they suspect Valencia Jumper was sleeping when the fire in her 3rd-floor apartment broke out. They say a pot left on her stove started the fire.
And I went into the kitchen and I opened a can of pork and beans or something, and I put it in a pot, put it on the stove, and I turned the stove on high.
He set the whole scene up that it looked like she fell asleep while she was cooking.
And I went to her kitchen. I noticed there was a bottle of rum, 151, and I poured the rum all over her body.
He considered her to be his little sister.
There were so many things in this case that were missed by various people. The only people who didn't miss the signs were her family. And her family fought tooth and nail to say this was not an accidental fire.
After Henry confessed, the medical examiner started re-examining the facts in that case. And one of the things that stood out was there was no soot or ash or anything in her throat where she breathed in smoke.
It should have been ruled that she was dead before the fire started. This case haunts me probably the most because of mistakes that were made, that had they not been made, Henry Wallace would have been charged then. And she was victim number 5. We wouldn't have had 5 more.
Henry Wallace's confession leaves veteran law enforcement shocked and almost caught off guard. But the next thing he does is remarkable. He takes the police on a field trip.
I knew this day was coming. I mean, I knew and I wanted it to come. And there have been several times during the actual crime that I was committing, I wanted to die. I ruined everything, man.
Henry Louis Wallace knew all of his victims, and they felt comfortable with him because he portrayed himself as the big brother, as the good friend.
Always very polite. It's the only male neighbor that I would even let in when my boyfriend wasn't at home. I mean, he was a friend. I trusted him.
Henry was like the perfect human predator.
So he kind of walked into their life knowing that at some point he's going to take their lives.
You never realized what Henry was all about And by the time you did, it was too late.
If you would go ahead and start with the first name that you put on your list there. Carolyn Love, is it?
Caroline Love.
Where did you meet Carolyn?
Caroline, I met her through my girlfriend's wedding.
And so we go to the board and we're looking for certain names, and Carolina Love name is not on the homicide board. So why is this name on the list?
Caroline Love was a woman that went missing in June of '92. She was a friend of Wallace's girlfriend at the time.
Remember, Shauna Hawk and Caroline Love were friends and they were co-workers.
We talked to him and he was very forthcoming, and he gave us a lot of information.
I dumped her body on the left side near where a little ditch kind of led from the highway back into the woods.
You think you could find it again?
I know I could.
And so we decided to find Carolina Love. We put Henry in the back of the van, and he directed us out to this remote area of the county to a field.
The investigators were told exactly where to look for another victim in this bizarre case.
And it was the skeletal remains of Caroline Love.
That tells the cops that this guy is for real. He's a killer because he's the only person who's going to know this.
We have to tell the public that this case was not a missing person, it is now a homicide.
Painful. I cried all yesterday, I cried all last night.
Caroline's family is even more devastated. This is the same man that went with Caroline's sister, Kathy, to file a missing persons report.
Caroline's niece, Sarah, was only 8 years old when her aunt went missing. And who comforted her during that time? Henry Wallace.
Then I remember being in her room with him and sitting on his lap. And I remember being sad and crying. And I remember him telling me, it's gonna be okay, she's gonna come back.
The same day that Henry is consoling Sarah, the police arrive to speak with Caroline's family. They have no idea the killer is in their midst, listening to every word.
And in talking to him, he remembered us talking to Caroline Love's family about her having an orange jumpsuit from Bojangles. He said after hearing that conversation, he decided to go back and remove that orange jumpsuit from her, because if we were looking for it, it would be easily seen by an aerial helicopter or somebody's walking by.
He returned to her body disposal site, which was outside, numerous times.
I went back a couple of times since then, so I would remember where the body was.
Caroline's family, who had held out hope for so long about the fate of their loved one, now have to face the cruel reality that her remains have been found.
You told me she would come back, but you didn't tell me she would come back like that. I mean, we didn't have anything to go back to. Her body was bones.
Back in the interrogation room, detectives ask one final question.
Is there anything else you can remember, Henry? As it.
Anybody else that you can think of in Charlotte or anywhere else that anything like this has ever happened to you before? You lived in South Carolina with your mom. Anything there that you remember?
One person.
Tell us about her.
Her name was Shanda Buffet. They call her Shan.
Henry Wallace confesses to police that he killed 18-year-old Tashanda Bethea in 1990 in his hometown of Barnwell, South Carolina. It's believed that Tashanda was his first victim.
She left home about 5 o'clock on the 19th, and they reported her missing on the 20th because she didn't return home.
She was walking one day. I picked her up, and I told her that we were going out to get some pot. And I pulled off the side of the road into a little ravine area.
Tashanda's body was found 2 weeks later by people fishing in a local pond.
The autopsy results show that she was strangled.
A few days later, Henry Wallace is brought in for questioning.
He was a very strong suspect, but we had nothing on him. He covered his alibis good.
I was questioned about her death, but I did not.
After literally getting away with murder, Henry Wallace moved to North Carolina, where he would kill again and again and again.
It's absolutely devastating. You sitting there thinking the worst, hoping for the best. And that's exactly what these relatives were doing. And unfortunately, it was not a good ending.
Henry Wallace, dubbed by some in the media as the Taco Bell Strangler, confesses to killing 11 women. But the question remains, why?
Two of the FBI's most respected mind hunters want to know what's inside Henry Wallace's mind.
He had some obviously very lethal problems.
They sit him down for interviews and put it all on videotape.
It was out of my control.
For years, the FBI has been developing behavioral profiling techniques. And there's a woman named Ann Burgess, a professor and author from Boston College, who has helped them.
Until we understand what's going on in the mind of the criminal, we're going to have more and more victims.
She was one of the few women in the FBI at the time doing that work, and I thought it was time to get her story out there. So after a little bit of convincing, she agreed to write this book, A Killer by Design. Wallace is featured in the book because he was a really interesting case.
Henry Wallace was, not that we would call him atypical, but certainly very different from some of the others. People liked him, and he was social.
Burgess was tapped by Henry Wallace's defense team to do an analysis on his mind.
The jury was to decide whether he deserved death or whether he deserved life. They just asked us to do a background and present what we thought.
She and retired FBI agent Robert Ressler visited Wallace inside the jail and conducted interviews. All of it was put on videotape.
The footage was provided exclusively to ABC News 2020.
Henry Wallace was quite open in what he talked about. He had many strengths in growing up, but he also had some obviously very lethal problems.
Do you understand any of this any better since you had a chance to kind of reflect on it?
Within this shell, there are two people. One person being a chameleon. He will adapt to anything, any environment, any situation, and he's a very well respected, very well liked person. He almost lures the women in for the other person.
So he had good Henry and bad Henry. Good Henry was a friendly person that made friends very easily, dated women very easily.
But then he said the bad Henry would come out, the monster, so to speak. He came out, he was angry, he had to kill them. Why he couldn't stay good Henry for a long time, we don't know, but he just couldn't.
But what's generating the anger?
Experiences in the past.
One of the reasons that Wallace points to for committing his crimes is he did have a really tough upbringing.
Henry tells them that when he was a child, he was molested. He also reveals that he and his mother, when he was growing up, had an extremely volatile relationship.
I was terrified of my mother. Terrified.
From
the beatings.
Henry also described being constantly teased about being a cheerleader and other things.
He was teased about his size, he was teased about his color.
Wallace was trying to reshape this really terrible childhood that he had by taking out his aggressions on people that he knew as if that was a replacement for the bad situations of his past.
He married his high school sweetheart, this prom photo capturing them in happier times.
But the marriage didn't last long and ended right before he moved to Charlotte.
It all starts collapsing after the wife left him.
I grew to to hate her very much. And there's still a lot of hatred inside for her. And I think that had I lived in South Carolina and not in Charlotte, that she would probably be one of the victims.
Wallace did think about killing his wife, but he was not able to actually go through with it.
I think that the majority of the victims reminded me of her in some way. Or when the murder and rape was taking place, who I was seeing was her and not the victim.
After his marriage dissolved, then Henry had to move back in with his mother.
That really kind of was the straw that broke it all down. And that's when he started into his murderous behavior.
My mom was very violent, and I think more than, other than a mate in these women, I was looking for a mother as well, or traits of my mother. And they were there, and all of them.
Henry Wallace was danger disguised as a friend, and his victims never saw him coming.
They felt comfortable with him because he portrayed himself as the big brother, as the good friend.
I think that was one of his motivations in a lot of these killings, was they were women he liked who didn't like him that way.
That's a more classic kind of a type of motive, if you will, for a serial killer.
One of the biggest questions for Burgess and Ressler was, how did Henry Wallace evade police for so long?
The only time that the police were concerned when the two murders occurred on the same day. That's when Barkham and Henderson.
Same day.
Yeah. That's when all of a sudden they started seeing connections and things that had happened 20 months ago.
You've got to do the victimology first, because they would have realized that they knew each other in some capacity, and that would have been a way to then zero in on Henry.
Burgess testified for the defense, and she told the jury that Wallace, while he was committing these murders, was in an alternate mental state.
I did feel that he was not in total control of his thoughts, that he was being controlled, if you will, by the obsession.
Henry Wallace was convicted of the rape and murder of 9 women.
I think we all knew what the verdict was going to be, guilty. So the real question was, does he live, does he die?
The jury recommended death. And again, I don't think anyone was terribly surprised.
It's such a sad case. It's not like you celebrate.
I just want people to not forget, you know, what happened to these girls in Charlotte, North Carolina. We don't want people to go around and hear the name Henry Wallace and not know who he is, you know, because, you know, he was a black serial killer that killed a lot of black women. I want the world to know what happened and that these girls' lives mattered.
Finally, there's justice. But there's one more victim of Henry Wallace's rampage. The sole survivor is now all grown up.
"18-year-old Brandy Henderson strangled to death."
Brandy Henderson's 10-month-old baby was also attacked and left for dead.
Henry said he got mad and said, "You got to do something with this baby. You got to shut this baby up," because Clarice was sitting right there beside her. He was pulling on his mom, on Brandy. So he took a pair of shorts and tied around his neck until he got quiet.
I think about Brandy's child often. How do you go on with your life? How does any loved one go on with their life when something this horrible happens?
The picture that we took of him at the hospital, it's like I still see that picture in my mind every day.
After he got out of the hospital, his father took him to Chicago. And when Tyrese was 5, his father passed away.
I'm still here. If it wasn't me reading these stories, I would have thought that I had died. So I'm like, reading these, well, I know this baby died. I know this. He survived? Are you freaking serious? He's well, he has a family, he's married, he's doing something with himself.
You know those Pop Rock candies? That's like him. That's exactly what I can describe him as. He's a ball of energy.
I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an entrepreneur. I try and be a great role model because I do have 3 sons.
He's been through a lot of things. He's had it rough.
He realized he never grieved for his mother, and he grew up without his mother's love.
I went through a whole grieving class. I wrote my mama a letter. I told her I was mad. I told her I was angry. I told her how much I missed her. I told her how sorry I was because I know that I wasn't doing the right things.
When I heard about his mother, inside I was crying, outside I was strong. I'm finding out more and more about the situation with his mother every day. I went and searched for it just to know, what type of woman she was and how it's instilled in him.
She was such a great mother. She would have done anything at all for him. Brandy told me that when she had Tyrese, that she felt like her life was complete.
They tell me that she was a great person. They say that she wanted the best for me. They're like, I was her masterpiece. It's like, I'm somebody's masterpiece. Like, that's a huge compliment for me.
I saw Tyrese when he was like 9 years old. We went to Chicago and visited him. But since then, since that time, I lost track. I feel guilty about it, but I just could not stay in contact with him because I knew he would have all these questions and I wasn't ready.
After 20 years, Brandy's cousin and close friend, George Burrell, is now reuniting with Brandy's son, Tyrese.
What's up, dog?
Oh, man.
What's up, old boy?
Oh, my gosh, man.
I've been in Charlotte.
Wow. Yes. And hello.
Liz, George,
nice to meet
Liz.
you, Liz.
Finally.
Man, it's good to see you.
You too. You getting old. You got
thank
gray
you.
hair. You got a gray beard.
See that?
Yeah.
The guilt, when she told me, come over and see me that night, and I didn't go, and then he came and killed me.
Yeah, man. Hey, look, as Brandy's son, listen, tell me how, as her son, my boy, you're not responsible for anything that happened to us. I also remember her life isn't the only life. It was also other victims and it's other family members who feel the same pain.
You healed, but you still got them scars.
Look at my neck, dog.
Man. I remember that, looking at you through the hospital door. Look, I'm shaking. Wow. That's how close, look at that, that's how close you came to not being here. Oh, my word. Wow. Your lips are still red from being strangled.
Yeah, and that was the main part. I'm like, that's why I say I'm the only survivor. Like, that's a survivor.
Yeah.
That little baby right there, like.
And that's you now.
Yeah, that's me now. Still with the tears and all, bro.
Wow.
At trial, Henry Wallace was found guilty of the assault on Tyrese.
I just like, why didn't I die? Truthfully, I wanted to die for a long time. As I started learning more that I'd be too selfish. She fought too hard to keep me alive. And that's why I didn't die. There's no time frame on grieving. There's no time frame on how long you can and can't miss somebody. But it's like, I'm a survivor.
Wallace was sentenced to death, but now he's asking a judge for a new trial.
For him to be here pleading for his life, not fair. It's not justice.
And I just believe it's time. It's time for us to finally see that end. It's 25 years this year that he was sentenced to death, and I'm ready for him to be executed.
I think he got an appropriate sentence, but North Carolina has not executed anyone in a very long time.
My goal now is to start a petition and let people sign that so that we can get an execution date and finally get this resolved.
I was determined that I wasn't going to hate him. You kind of have to let it go, otherwise it will consume you.
I don't feel hate for him now. I started journaling, and it really did help.
I forgave Henry years ago for the madness of what he did.
I don't harbor that hate for him, but I do think that justice should be served.
Audrey is buried in South Carolina. My dad donated an acre of land for a new cemetery, and Audrey was the first one buried in that cemetery.
She has a niece named Audrey Lynette Franklin. Part of her legacy will definitely continue, so we're excited about that.
She does have a son. His name is Eric Slaughter. He reminds me of Deborah a lot. I think she would be very proud of him and the progress that he has made in his life.
I just wanted mothers to come together and join our forces and our hearts. MAMO, Mothers of Murdered Offspring.
The whole point in MAMO being created was to make sure that Shauna's memory lived on.
Should have never happened. But it made us better detectives, and it made Charlotte Police Department a better homicide unit.
In a statement to 2020 about the Wallace investigation, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department says the detectives worked the cases as diligently as they would have any homicide case, with the race of the victim being irrelevant. In the aftermath of the murders, the department says it added staffing to the homicide unit and implemented regular mandatory meetings to better identify related cases.
You know, the guys in the homicide unit, I know them all from that time. It's just that they were put in a situation where you just couldn't win.
Listen to the families, because they are the voices of the victims.
I fight for my own breath sometimes. I fight to be here. If I had $1 for every time that I've been told, Miss Sumter, I know I'm gonna make it because you're making it.
None of these young African-American ladies deserve to die. They were young ladies who deserve to have a bright future. And so, you know, my hope and prayer is that even though as tragic as this was, something positive will come out.
The final analysis, you're looking at a guy whose cup truly runneth over. Tonight on a special edition of 2020.
Bar, what'd you think? Where's my hero?
We say goodbye to the 41st president.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush.
The video you'll only see here from the ABC archives. I said, who is this good-looking girl, that beautiful girl over there? The beloved first couple of the country, spending 73 years together.
And stay fat, stay gray, stay wrinkled. We love you.
Now, the family stories you've never heard about their final days.
He was with her the whole time, and then on the day that she passed away, he was there all day, holding her hand.
Tonight, the political dynasty they would build together. I kiss you, but your makeup might smear. The national events that shaped them.
My dog Millie knows more about foreign affairs than these two bozos.
He is yesterday's man.
The two boys were bitter, and we're going to get Clinton, we're going to get revenge. And she said, get over it.
This son of ours is not going to let you down. He's going to go all the way.
The historic events that broke them.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Why should you be elected for 4 more years?
And the legacy they left behind.
He's the last president of the greatest generation.
Here's Amy Robach.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear
that I, human, will be one of great decency and devotion to country and family.
Also part of that legacy, his deep bond with his companion of 73 years, former First Lady. At her funeral in April, President Bush was next to her casket, greeting mourners who had come to pay their respects.
It absolutely amazed me. There he sat for hours, shaking hands, because he knew that they wanted to see him. So it was one last act of duty.
After my grandmother passed, my grandfather was back in the hospital the day after.
There is breaking news. Former President George H.W. Bush has now been hospitalized with an infection that has spread to his blood.
I just remember talking with my mom and my family members and just saying, we just need to get him to Maine, because that's really where his heart is.
And that is where he went, to his beloved home in Kennebunkport, Maine.
So when you look out at this scene, what do you see?
I look at the sea, I see the power of the sea. I see the wonders of the sea. I see my boat. I love going in a boat. And I just feel totally relaxed here in Maine, by the coast.
Kennebunkport was sort of his refuge, his sanctuary.
It's the place where he and my grandmother would come every summer. It's just always been a place where our family has come together.
Family means everything to me. I don't know where I'd be in life if I wasn't blessed with a lot of kids.
And not something that we see very often these days. They met at a Christmas dance in Greenwich, Connecticut. My grandmother was wearing her red and green Christmas dress, and my grandfather spotted her.
I said, who is this good-looking girl, that beautiful girl over there? I said, that's Barbara Pierce from Rye, New York. And the rest is history.
Barbara Bush set eyes on 17-year-old George Bush and never looked back. They laughed together all the time. You can look at videos of the two of them just cracking each other up.
Is he still the handsomest man you'd ever seen?
My eyesight's getting bad.
Golly.
These are people who loved each other deeply. And Barbara Bush was a great political partner for George Bush. I think she had a great deal to do with his political ascent.
Coming up next, during that meteoric rise, tragedy strikes.
My grandparents suffered the worst thing that a young couple can endure.
Stay with us.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations.
He's the last president of the greatest generation.
George Herbert Walker Bush was born in 1924 into a wealthy New England family. His father, Prescott, was a businessman and U.S. Senator from Connecticut.
The Bush family has always been steeped in public service. There's the feeling in the Bush family that you draw on the resources of this country to make money and provide for your family, and then you give back.
I was lucky at birth and had some privilege, but I've tried to put something back. I served my nation in war and stayed right with it.
His mother, Dorothy, instilled the values that Bush would carry throughout his life.
George Bush learned lessons in character at his mother's knee, and first and foremost, he learned humility. His mother used to say to him, George, don't brag. Or if he bragged about an accomplishment on the baseball diamond, she would say, well, George, how did the team do? So she encouraged him to think about the larger community and not just himself.
On the day he graduated high school in 1942, Bush took the unusual path of enlisting in the Navy instead of going to college and became the youngest naval aviator flying combat missions in World War II.
He is really the last of our World War II presidents and saw what the world could do to itself when there were failures of leadership.
This rare film shows Bush being rescued after his plane was shot down by the Japanese over the Pacific.
But when they picked him up, you can see that look in his face, that concern, even though he's being rescued. And that's the only time I've ever seen George Herbert Walker Bush with a little bit of fear in his eyes.
After leaving the Navy, Bush married his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce, after that chance meeting at a dance before the war. Their first child, George, was born while Bush attended his father's alma mater, Yale University. But George H.W. Bush was determined not to follow too closely in his father's footsteps.
He wanted to go west, traveled out to Texas, to Midland, Texas, with Barbara and a couple of the kids.
He told me once, he said, I got in my car, I drove out west, and I never looked back.
But the young couple suffered a tragic blow when their daughter Robin died of leukemia just shy of her 4th birthday.
Barbara Bush's hair turned white from that experience when she was 28 years old.
Do you ever get over that?
No. You don't get over it. It's very hard to talk about her.
I know, even now after all these years.
But it makes everybody more valuable. George Bush and I love every single living human more because of Robin.
My grandmother, in her final days, was at peace with dying, and she knew she was going to heaven and would be with Robin. And my grandfather, too, we knew that when he passed, he would go be with my grandmother and with Robin. So as much as it hurts to lose them, it's been reassuring to know that they're all together.
After making his fortune in the oil business in Texas, George Bush turned his sights to politics, Barbara and their children campaigning by his side.
Barbara Bush was a great political partner for George Bush. I think she had a great deal to do with his political ascent.
Bush had been a 2-term congressman when, in 1971, President Richard Nixon appointed him ambassador to the United Nations. He was director of the CIA and even served as a diplomat in China during the Ford administration.
He saw China burgeoning, so he got to see this fledgling powerhouse at a very nascent time in its development. And I think that was an incredibly important diplomatic experience for George Bush.
And the next president of the United States, George Bush.
Bush decided to make a run for president in the 1980 election. He faced formidable competition for the Republican nomination: senators, congressmen, and the governor of California, Ronald Reagan.
George Bush and Ronald Reagan had a very vigorous campaign against each other, where George Bush famously dubbed Ronald Reagan's economic plan voodoo economics, and that caused some bad blood between the two men.
This type of what I call a voodoo economic policy, it just isn't going to work.
But after a hard-fought battle for the nomination, Reagan tapped George Bush to be his vice president. The Reagan-Bush ticket won by a landslide.
And the 21-gun salute roars out for President Reagan.
Just 2 months into his term, an attempt was made on President Reagan's life. Vice President Bush is credited for his measured response to the crisis as he raced to the White House as Reagan went into surgery.
His arrival was very classy. We discussed about bringing him directly into the White House lawn from Andrews Air Force Base. And Bush vetoes that idea.
And when asked why, he said, because only the president lands on South Lawn. And I think Ronald Reagan appreciated that. And the two became very good friends.
Bush crisscrossed the globe representing the United States.
George Bush traveled to 75 or so countries during the course of the presidency. And Reagan would draw on the experiences of George Bush to understand a little bit more about what was happening around the world.
After 8 years as Reagan's vice president, Bush decided to make a bid for the presidency.
When George Bush was around Reagan as his vice president, he would literally sort of curve his body in deference to Reagan. His speechwriter called it the Episcopal tilt.
And he wasn't Reagan. He didn't have Reagan's political skills. He wasn't that good on the stump. So we needed a hook.
My opponent won't rule out raising taxes.
He got this idea of saying, I'll just promise not to raise taxes.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
Read my lips, no new taxes. He did it to get elected. He thought he had to consolidate the conservative base.
Bush defeated Democrat Michael Dukakis, and while it wasn't a landslide like Reagan's elections, on January 20th, 1989, he was sworn in as the 41st President of the United States.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We live in a peaceful, prosperous time, but we can make it better. For a new breeze is blowing, and a world refreshed by freedom seems reborn.
A new president faces a world in turmoil and a campaign promise that threatened to make or break him.
What he meant to say was no new taxes for the rich.
When we return.
Congress says, okay, I'm going to do it.
So many people's view of you has changed. It's as if Clark Kent became Superman.
When you are not the number 2 on a team, but are really heading a team, as a president must do, it's different. And I've learned so much from this man.
And the presidency of George Bush was shaping up to be very different than Ronald Reagan's.
I think he admired Reagan's decisiveness, admired Reagan's rhetorical skills, but he wanted, when he came into office, to be a different kind of president, to be, as he said, kinder and gentler.
Do you have a vision, and if so, what is it?
I think my vision is the same as the 40 presidents that have preceded me. A world at peace. Not at any price, but at peace where freedom and democracy prevail.
That vision would be tested early in George Bush's presidency during the waning days of the Cold War.
Poland has started along an ascending path of democratic change.
George Bush was the right man to be in the presidency during the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Bush knew from the beginning that it wasn't going to be easy to coax the former Soviet Union out of a communist regime. As they like to say at the White House in those days, trying to bring in a 10-pound fish on a 5-pound line.
As the old Soviet order began to collapse, with it went the Berlin Wall.
It mattered enormously that when the Berlin Wall came down in November of 1989, Bush refused to be triumphalist. Didn't crow, didn't dance on the wall, as he put it.
I always wondered in my heart, was he remembering what his mother used to say about, don't take credit for yourself, give credit to the other team. And in this case, it was the German people.
His instinct was to ensure that the Iron Curtain went down with a whimper and not a bang. That natural humility kicked in, as did his natural diplomatic instincts.
Change was in the air all around the world.
The tectonic geopolitical plates were shifting. This was a time of remarkable change. You had the Tiananmen Square uprisings in China. You had Nelson Mandela being set free and ultimately becoming the president of South Africa.
So help me God.
These are remarkable times.
Diplomatic experience and his 8 years as vice president had honed Bush's foreign policy skills.
He frequently reached out to world leaders and would talk to them when there was nothing on the agenda.
Just saying, hey, how you doing? Just checking in. How's the family? What's going on? And just establishing that rapport.
Just to get to know them better, to engender their trust, so that when he needed them, he could go back to them. Prudence is a hallmark of George Bush's leadership. And in retrospect, that prudence, that instinctive humility in George Bush were the right qualities at that very sensitive time in our history.
Humility was a quality that also described Barbara Bush as First Lady.
You've received so many letters from people all over the country who say, oh, now I can let my hair go gray, I can gain a pound or two. They're so happy about you.
Well, I've certainly gotten a lot of letters. Stay fat, stay gray, stay wrinkled, we love you. And they are all meant with great warmth and love.
What they are saying when they talk about Barbara is that they sense in her a certain genuineness.
I think that's a very funny book.
As First Lady, Barbara Bush promoted literacy, even ghostwriting books by their dog, Millie.
President Bush His wife, Barbara, loved dogs.
That's pickles right there.
It was national news when Millie had puppies at the White House, revealing a rare glimpse of President Bush at a relaxed moment.
Sarah was like holding a grandchild, you know, they're afraid to drop her.
It looked so immediate, it looked so warm, it looked so spontaneous.
During vacations, that couple would gather with children and grandchildren at their estate in Kennebunkport, Maine.
It's a place, you know, all of my cousins come together, and when my grandfather was president, there used to be a helicopter pad, and we would take the little cars and we'd go down and greet him, and he'd come off.
And there he is, the president, our dad.
There's certainly, from top to bottom, a family full of love and affection for each other. A family is an important ingredient for anyone whose last name is Bush.
Members of the White House press corps trailed the tireless president.
I got up at 6 a.m. many mornings to watch him play golf. He loved to have reporters there because it made it like the U.S. Open.
He would start out in the day and he would have 18-hour marathon sporting events. It was like he was a one-man decathlon. There were always competitions. There would be tennis, and there would be horseshoes, and there would be boating, and there would be golfing.
The Bushes were all about love braided with competition.
Dad, how are you playing today?
Very well, Dorothy. I'm at the peak of my game.
They were a very competitive family, but there was an enormous amount of love.
Back at the White House, President Bush signed landmark pieces of legislation.
Signs the Americans with Disabilities Act. He establishes the Clean Air Amendments that really is our environmental policy now. These are big, big pieces of legislation.
George Herbert Walker Bush, domestic affairs, was kind of custodial. It was marked by a philosophy of do no harm. He didn't have a great big agenda. It was fairly minimal, but looking back on it, you can point to a couple of things that were defined and accomplished.
Supreme Court.
More controversial was Bush's nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. The enduring confirmation hearings featured testimony of law professor Anita Hill accusing Justice Thomas of sexual harassment.
On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess.
I deny each and every single allegation against me today.
And when the economy began to falter, President Bush was forced to confront a crushing national deficit.
Our deficit is big, and I don't want to be a part of continuing to saddle the generations to come, our grandchildren, with more and more deficit.
He decides that the good of the country is to raise some taxes and establish budgetary reforms.
I've been pressing the Congress for a real growth package.
He knew at that point he might be sacrificing a second term, but he believed it was the right thing to do.
Raising taxes was a controversial move that some critics believed would seal his political fate.
Why do you think that your image has been tarnished in this way? I mean, a year ago, the strongest leader, a year later, weak, indecisive?
When we return.
Good evening. There has been a dangerous late-breaking development in the Persian Gulf.
August 1990, President George H.W. Bush faced a new challenge, not the culmination of the Cold War, but crisis in the Middle East.
There are reports that Iraqi forces have invaded Kuwait.
It was an enormous test for George Bush's presidency.
He appeared on television getting out of his helicopter heading to the White House. And he famously said,
"This will not stand. This will not stand, this aggression against Kuwait.
This will not stand."
There is no justification whatsoever for this outrageous and brutal act of aggression.
Bush built an unprecedented coalition of dozens of countries, relying on relationships skillfully built over the years.
You know, that coalition didn't just happen. It happened because George Bush stayed on the phone night and day. I mean, we'd awaken at 6 in the morning to Bonjour Francois, and at night we'd go to the other side of the world.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait.
It's the toughest decision the president makes, I can tell you that. It is the toughest. You feel a responsibility for every life keeping them safe, every life that's lost. You feel that
responsibility.
It is a quick, decisive victory.
We kicked the Iraqi army out of Kuwait. For years afterwards, people criticized the president. Why didn't you go to Baghdad?
Do I like it that Saddam Hussein, this brutal dictator, is still there? No, but it was not our objective to go into downtown Baghdad and put American lives at risk to get Saddam Hussein.
148 American lives were lost in combat, far less than what was feared. The war is considered a military success. Bush's approval ratings skyrocketed.
Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated.
We used force wisely, and we did it in a way that held our casualties to a minimum.
He has an approval rating of 89%, one of the highest approval ratings in the history of the presidency. As soon as the confetti from the parades is swept up, Americans go back to worrying about their situation at home.
Conservative Republicans increasingly worried that the White House has no clear program to deal with the foundering U.S. economy.
He was hit with criticism from all sides right when he was heading into the 1992 re-election campaign.
President Bush's approval rating took another beating today, largely because of concern about the economy.
Why do you think that your image has been tarnished in this way? I mean, a year ago, the strongest leader, a year later, weak, indecisive?
Well, the year ago...
Is it just the economy?
See, the reason, yes, I think it largely is the economy.
And there was that broken promise.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
It would haunt Bush.
I made one compromise on taxes. It didn't have a deleterious effect on the economy, but I think it caused a credibility problem.
What he meant to say was, no new taxes for the rich.
His opponents in the upcoming presidential race would pounce on the flip-flop. Independent Texas billionaire Ross Perot and young Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton.
He is yesterday's man. He offers us no real hope or vision for the future.
In 1992, he ran into one of the great political talents in American history. And so that was kind of a perfect storm.
The 1992 election was about two generations. It was about the World War II generation, the greatest generation, versus the boomers. But when Clinton went on Arsenio Hall, it was Clinton like identifying himself as being of a different generation.
Why should you be elected for 4 more years?
Because we've already accomplished big things, and because I don't leave the job unfinished, and I don't quit, and I don't pick up my marbles and go home when the going gets tough, nor should a president.
He's the most decent, honest person.
Wow.
Shouldn't say that in front of him, should I? And very funny. Not just funny looking. I mean very funny.
Well, I know who you're going to vote for.
You're darn right.
He got elected to do this, then the Congress...
But there are missteps in the campaign. Bush made a small but devastating mistake in one of the debates.
George Bush glanced at his watch. It led to the reinforcing of impressions that George Bush was indifferent, that he was above this campaign thing.
Make no mistake, for a guy that many people thought was a sort of nice, kind, compassionate person, he was very competitive.
My dog Millie knows more about foreign affairs than these two bozos.
November 1992, to Bush's shock and dismay, Bill Clinton won the election. In Bush's diary, he wrote, "It's hurt, hurt, hurt."
I just had a great feeling of letting down a lot of people that worked for me, a lot of work for our administration.
It was just disappointing. It was very disappointing.
So we will get behind this new president and wish him well.
George Bush, again, always his mother's son, was gracious in defeat. That was an inherent quality in George Bush. Grace, dignity, class.
And humor. He would even invite a special guest to the White House to boost staff morale, comedian Dana Carvey, who lampooned him on Saturday Night Live.
Tomorrow is Earth Day. Environment, a difficult problem. Gotta be prudent.
The way to do the president is to start out with Mr. Rogers. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Then you add a little John Wayne. Here we go. Let's go over the ridge. You put them together. You got George Herbert Walker Bush.
I think that's just a remarkable reflection of his ability to poke fun at himself.
But there are no laughs on January 20th, 1993, the last day of the Bush administration.
I took a photo of him in bed. This was going to be the last couple of hours that he was president.
And it was a sad day when they had to essentially give the keys to the next family.
Time to say goodbye, but not for long.
Little did they know that they would be back 8 years later when their son became president.
This son of ours is not going to let you down. He's going to go all the way and serve with great honor all the way.
Stay with us. Back in Houston, after more than a decade at the epicenter of power and politics in Washington, D.C., the former president has to quickly adjust to life outside the White House.
Well, this is the first minute of the beginning of our new life, and now it's back to the real world for the Bushes.
The next morning when he woke up, Barbara Bush said, "George, from now on you got to get up and make your own coffee." That was his first step back into being Mr. George Bush, former president of the United States.
The Bushes were determined not to dwell on the loss.
Did he want to be president? Absolutely. But the times were against us. You do what you can, and then you move on. And there are a lot of things we want to do.
Texas is ready for a new generation of leadership, and I will provide that.
Their oldest son, George W., running for governor of Texas.
I want to thank everybody.
And Jeb for governor of Florida. Their father claims he was never interested in preserving his political legacy.
George Bush hated the word dynasty. It's smacked of monarchy. But he was proud of his family going into public service.
There'd be nothing worse than the father who got defeated running for his second term for president, trying to make something, be something through his son.
Would you have wished a political dynasty if you could have chosen?
Not for me.
But in 2000, the Bushes found themselves again on a presidential election campaign.
I swore I would never campaign again. Maybe I should have said, read my lips.
This son of ours is not going to let you down. He's going to go all the way and serve with great honor all the way.
Just 8 years after his own presidency, a proud father witnessed his son ascend to the same position.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
To see your son succeed you in the Oval Office, that's an amazing moment and unprecedented, but for John and John Quincy Adams in the 19th century.
We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center.
It is a presidency that was quickly tested. 3 days after the September 11th attacks, the bond between father and son was on display after President George W. Bush gave a speech at the National Cathedral.
So many have suffered so great a loss, and today we express our nation's sorrow.
Then he walked back to the pew, and his father, without looking at his son, just reached over and grabbed his hand. You could see manifest love and loyalty between those two men.
The love and loyalty was clear, but less obvious was just how much sway did the former president have over the current one.
I think the temptation for folks is to think about George H.W. Bush, who had held the office, schooling his son when he became president. And in fact, that's not what he did at all.
We talk on issues, and we talk a lot, but not mostly. It's about family.
That remained the case even when the younger Bush went to war with the same dictator as his father, Saddam Hussein.
I believe the father understood that his son was headed in the wrong direction. But his son was president of the United States, and he was not going to say, "Now sit down here, young man, I'm going to tell you what to do." That was not George Herbert Walker Bush.
They mismanaged the war, and I think the father wanted to warn him, but the son did not want to hear it.
Tonight, the president faces growing criticism about his handling of the war.
Weapons of mass destruction have yet to be found.
The new round of criticism for President Bush.
Recently, Bush Sr. revealed to biographer John Meacham his private concerns at the time.
He didn't like the axis of evil talk.
An axis of evil
arming to threaten the peace of the world.
He held Cheney and Rumsfeld to some degree responsible for it, but he did tell me ultimately it's the president's fault.
But publicly, the former president stayed removed from politics, and as part of that exclusive club of ex-presidents, he forged a surprising new friendship.
In 2004, a tsunami ripped through Southeast Asia.
Terrible, terrible disaster in South Asia.
George W. Bush tapped his father and his father's opponent in 1992, Bill Clinton, to represent the United States.
We come to you not as presidents, but as two private citizens.
And the two remarkably became friends. The Bush family would tell you that they almost adopted Bill Clinton. They started calling him bro or brother from another mother.
I think it sent a good sign across the country because you run against somebody that doesn't make you an enemy.
The Bush's post-presidential life was devoted to philanthropy, with a focus on literacy, volunteerism, and cancer research in honor of their daughter, Robin.
One of his Secret Service agents' children was diagnosed with cancer, and some of the Secret Service agents shaved their heads in solidarity. And my grandfather was like, well, I want to do that. He shaved his head, so that's just exactly the kind of guy that Gampy is.
And of course, his main focus was on his family.
My grandfather's always liked to be around younger people, because I think it keeps him young at heart.
So young at heart that at age 75, he decided to celebrate his birthday by skydiving.
The Army is not happy with this idea. You know, the last thing you want to do is have your president jump out of an airplane, and he did it several times, and he had a ball. That's him.
I want the people, American people, to understand that just because you're old, that doesn't mean you can't do things in life. And I hope it inspires other people to get out the front door and mow the lawn or go and play shuffleboard. When I landed on the sands, and I said, Barbara, bursting with pride, what do you think?
Bar, what'd you think?
She said, I haven't seen a free fall like that since the '92 election.
That is not true.
What's what you were thinking?
I wish I'd thought of it, though.
Coming up, one last political standoff.
Jeb Bush is a low-energy person.
There were reports that President Bush was throwing a shoe at the TV set when Trump was on.
Stay with us. Just when they thought they were out,
I'm a candidate for President of the United States.
They were pulled right back in when in 2015 their son Jeb announced his candidacy for president.
He's steady, he's honest, and I'm thrilled to be the mother of one of the greatest men I know, Jeb Bush.
And ran straight into the Donald Trump juggernaut.
Jeb Bush is a low-energy person.
I think Donald Trump is trying to insult his way to the presidency, and it's not going to work.
There were reports that President Bush was throwing a shoe at the TV set when Trump was on.
I don't think it should be any great surprise that George H.W. Bush, lifelong Republican, would choose to vote for Hillary Clinton because Donald Trump was the antithesis in many respects of everything that George Bush stood for.
I'm really rich. I'll show you that in a second.
The Bush ethos is about civility, humility, and the notion of service above self.
And love. The great affection between George and Barbara was always evident. They would flirt and tease each other.
I think this would be a very good time to bring in your #1 asset.
Millie?
Millie! He should have said Ranger. That's the love of his life. How are you?
I'm just fine.
Glad to see you. How are you?
I'd kiss you, but your makeup might smear.
What? What do you mean you'd kiss me, but my makeup might smear?
He's always so charming, right?
No, he is charming.
You know Mrs. Bush is your #1 asset, don't you?
I certainly know that.
I'm his #1 fan.
And decades later, she remained his #1 fan, and he was still gushing about her.
She's just so kind, and she's an amazing spirit. She's just wonderful.
After her passing, George Bush released this statement. I always knew Barbara was the most beloved woman in the world. We have faith she is in heaven. Jeb Bush spoke of his parents' great love at his mother's funeral.
My dad is a phenomenal letter writer, and he would write Mom on their wedding anniversaries. Here's one of them written on January 6, 1994. Will you marry me? Oops, I forgot, we did that 49 years ago. I was very happy on that day in 1945, but I'm even happier today.
Last June, when he was in the hospital, George Bush tweeted this photo of himself reading A Great American Love Story, adding, "Enjoying a great book and a wonderful walk down memory lane." The book was co-written by his granddaughter.
At certain points, we'll stop and say, "Gampy, do you remember this?" And he says, "Yes," or sometimes he says, "Vaguely."
And now that President George H.W. Bush has passed, he will be laid to rest at his presidential library in College Station, Texas, next to his wife and daughter, Robin.
When I was a little guy, I'd fear death. I'd worried about it, be scared. Not anymore.
I think history will understand that this was a president that certainly made the world a much better place than he found it.